Good evening to you all. I'd like to welcome you to the Monday, February 26, 2018 meeting of the Falls Church City Council and ask you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Madam Clerk, will you call roll, please?
Yes, sir. Ms. Conley?
Here.
Mr. Duncan?
Here.
Ms. Hardy?
Here.
Mr. Lickenhouse?
Here.
Mr. Snyder?
Here.
Mr. Z?
Here.
Mayor Tarter?
Here.
Thank you, Council.
Thank you. And welcome to you all. We're delighted you all are here with us this evening. I know we've got a big crowd, but we've got a lot of fun things on the agenda, a lot of exciting things to talk about tonight. Do we have a motion regarding the meeting agenda?
I move to amend the meeting agenda so that we can take item 10B3, Resolution TR 18-15 on gun violence prevention, and move that up in the agenda so that it is 8B5.
Okay, do we have a second? Second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstentions? The ayes have it. The meeting agenda has been adopted as amended. The first item on the agenda is the Auto Decal Design Awards. And I understand our treasurer is going to present the winners tonight?
Yes, I am. Thank you all very much, Mayor Tarter, members of council. I'm the treasurer, Jody Acosta, and the treasurer's office issues the city decals that go on your car windshield. And we do this every year. So I guess it was 3 years ago now, we decided it would be a great idea if we had a contest for students, the students who either live in Falls Church, go to school in Falls Church, high school students, if they would submit their designs for the car decal. And that's what we've done. This is our third year. So this year we had 20 submissions, and if you look on the screen up here on either side, those are a picture of all 20 submissions. They're really great. Got a lot of talent here in Falls Church. And I think this is the most submissions we've had. And we had a citizen panel who met on a Saturday, that snowy Saturday we had about a month ago. We all met and we chose the top 5 designs, which will be the next slide. So those are the 5 finalists. We had those 5 designs framed. They're on the table in the back. And I'm now going to call up each one of the finalists, and you're going to get to meet them. They're going to read their paragraph that they also submitted with their design. And then after that, we'll announce the winner of the design contest. And this is in no particular order. So the first person that we'll call up is, how about William Ng? He's in the 9th grade, and his design was entitled "The Little City Takes Flight." So
All right,
William,
come on down.
do you want to come up and read your paragraph?
Welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me here. I guess I just read my thing, right? Okay.
Sure.
So this is my piece, The Little City Takes Flight. In this piece, Virginia state insect, the tiger swallowtail butterfly, is resting with its wings frayed outward. Contained within its wings are the streets of our little city. Like a caterpillar to a butterfly, our little city is evolving into something beautiful and new. That's it.
Fantastic.
Okay. Okay. And next, we had an 11th grader, Myra Zing, and she submitted A Fruitful Community. She could not be here tonight. Her mom emailed this morning and said she had the flu. So we're very sad that she can't be here, and we hope she gets well soon. And so I thought I would just read her a paragraph.
Sure.
She's in the 11th grade at George Mason High School. My drawing shows a crate of apples like one you would see at the farmer's market. I intentionally made that connection and even tried to resemble the top right corner banner with the farmer's market banner by the State Theater, because it is a place many Falls Churchians gather. The different colored apples show our diverse community of people of all different backgrounds and aspirations. Finally, the apple also symbolizes our school system, coming from the teacher's apple idea, because Falls Church City takes pride in our excellent schools. The yellow in the background also goes well with the rest of the decal. So, thank you, Myra. And next, if we could have Jack Sykes come up. His design is called Riding into the Future. He also submitted a design last year. He's only in the 10th grade, so here he is to read his paragraph.
This is a timeline of Falls Church City using landmarks. It started with Falls Church in 1734. Then the Tinner Hill Monument in 1999, in which recent years with the Little City bike racks in 2016. The bike racks represent our community coming from the Falls Church and moving through civil rights times towards the long road of the future, aka West Broad Street.
Fantastic.
Okay, thank you, Jack. And I'll try to slow it down so Nikki has time to get the next one up. It's Tessa Bonneau, her title is Cherry Hill in Summertime, and she's in the 9th grade at George Mason. And Tessa, do you want to come up? Come on up.
So my piece is called Cherry Hill in the Summertime, as she said. Sorry. Basically, so many of my best memories of Falls Church include playing at Cherry Hill during the summer. It's like when I was a little kid at the preschool, and from reading a book in the shade of a tree to eating ice cream while listening to a concert in the park, Cherry Hill represents my favorite memories here in Falls Church.
Thank you,
Great
Tessa.
job.
And next I'll ask Juliana Milton to come up. Her design is entitled My Pretty Little City, and Juliana's in the 10th grade at George Mason High School. Juliana? Juliana or Juliana?
Juliana, both.
Okay.
That's good. So my design is inspired by the State Theater. I decided to use this element of Falls Church as the model of my design because I believe the State Theater is a distinct and popular attraction in the little city. The theater itself can be symbolic for the busyness and excitement present in the city of Falls Church. It also portrays the cultural aspect of Falls Church, for this small city holds many different events, and entertainment is one of the first things that I associate with it. The design also includes a small cardinal sitting on the top of the sign because it is the official bird of Virginia. Yes, so.
All right, how to decide, huh?
Okay, now we're going to reveal the winner and all the placements. So I think the next slide is the drum roll, right? Okay, one drum roll. And the winner of the vehicle decal design contest is, drum roll, My Pretty Little City by Juliana Milton.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask each one of them to get their design, their frame design, and bring it up so we can get a picture. I'm going to announce the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th place. So you want to go back and get your design. I forgot to mention, we had 5 submissions this year because we only normally have 4 finalists. But this year when we voted, the citizen panel voted, it was a dead tie for that 4th place. So we voted again, and it was still a virtual tie. So after the 2nd time around, we said, you know what, we're just going to put all 5 of them in as the finalist and let the citizens decide. So they did. And I also have to say that we had over 700 votes total. And if the rest of you guys want to come on up too. We had over 700 votes total, and there was only 15 votes between the 1st place and the 2nd place. Yeah. And so I guess, go ahead to the next slide, Cindy. So the 2nd place is William Ng with My Pretty Little City. 3rd place was Tessa Bonneau, Cherry Hill in the Summertime. 4th place was Jack Sykes, Riding into the Future. And 5th place was Myra Zing, A Fruitful Community. And I just want to say thank you guys so much. clearly, we have so many talented student artists here in Falls Church, so thank you so much. And now we're going to get some pictures. Do you want them to move back or you guys to come forward? Either way. Okay. Oh, yeah, right.
All right, all set? All right, congratulations.
Thank you all.
Got some extremely talented students here. Those are fantastic. So anyway, congratulations to everyone. Do we have any oaths of office to administer, Madam Clerk?
I don't believe so. There's nobody here for an oath of office this evening. No, no, sir.
Okay. Do you want to move on to summary of written comments then?
Yes, thank you. Karen Sharp wrote about bond financing strategies for city projects. The Recreation and Parks Advisory Board provided comments on the Broad and Washington project. Kate and Eric Nesson of 302 North Virginia Avenue asked that the 2.9% budget increase requested by the schools be funded. Eric Pelton, 303 North Oak Street, provided comments on the campus RFP, as did the Planning Commission and the Environmental Sustainability Council. And Sajila Ramsey wrote to complain about construction traffic on West Street.
All right. Thank you very much. So now we're going to move on to the receipt of public comment. I do have some speaker slips already. Anyone who wishes to speak is welcome to do so. We just ask that you fill out one of these red speaker slips and turn it into the clerk. And when you speak, please keep your comments to 3 minutes so there's time for everyone, and state your name and address for the record. Our first speaker is Isabel Davis, who's a George Mason High School student. I think who wants to speak about exotic animals. So welcome.
My name is Isabel Davis, and I live on 311 North Van Buren Street, Falls Church, Virginia. And I am a sophomore at George Mason High School. I'm here today to talk about the exotic animal laws in Falls Church City. I believe that the current law is overly restrictive and arbitrary. I'm here to convince you that the law should be reviewed and amended in a way that better balances the freedom of the residents of Falls Church to choose the pets that suit them while also safeguarding public health and safety. I want to make 3 points. First, the city code changed in 1998 in a way that many people did not understand, and I think still don't understand. Second, the current law is vague and not effective. Third, the reasoning behind the restrictive law we have now is incorrect. I became interested in this issue because I wanted to get a hedgehog, and I would like to become a veterinarian. But when I researched hedgehog breeders, I found out that Falls Church City does not permit hedgehogs as pets. I looked up the Falls Church City law and then went to the library to research how it was passed. I found out that the city changed its law in 1998 to make it very restrictive. I was surprised that more people did not object when the law was changed. But then I saw that when the public notice about changing the law was issued, it said that the new law was just supposed to update the Falls Church City Code to bring it into compliance with state laws. That's not what happened. The Falls Church City Code is much more restrictive than Virginia law. I looked at the minutes of the meeting where these changes were approved, and there was no debate and almost no public comment. This tells me that Falls Church City residents did not understand that the new law was going to be so restrictive. The current code provision consists of a limited list of animals that are permitted, while anything not on the list is considered exotic and may not be kept as a pet. Many common pets, such as hedgehogs, chinchillas, hermit crabs, lizards, sugar gliders, frogs, and turtles, are illegal in Falls Church City. Almost no one that I have asked has known about the exotic animal law, and everyone I have told about the law has been surprised that many common exotic pets did not make the list. Knowing this, it is not surprising that I have met many people who own or have owned illegal exotic pets without knowing that they were breaking the city law. In fact, some of these animals have been housed in our schools. This indicates This indicates that the law is too broad and not effective and should therefore be altered. Some parts of the law are hard to understand. The code allows, quote, birds which are normally purchased through a pet store. All other birds are prohibited. It also allows, quote, goldfish and aquarium fish. All other fish are prohibited. I think it's hard to know which birds are normally purchased through a pet store, and any fish can be an aquarium fish if you put it in an aquarium. These definitions should be fixed. I was given 3 main reasons for the restrictive law. Exotic animals carry zoonotic diseases, exotic pets have difficult care requirements, and the possibility of exotic animals becoming fad pets. Zoonotic diseases are present in every species of animal, even dogs and cats, which can carry ringworm, rabies, and toxoplasmosis. In addition, salmonella, which I was told would be the main concern with many exotic pets, can also be carried by dogs and cats, and is commonly carried by snakes, which are legal. I'm running out of time, so I would like to mention that the Arlington County has recently changed its law, and it made it more restrictive, but a lot of people asked for many common exotic pets, the ones that I would like to legalize, that they remain legal, and for that reason they have remained legal. So I think we should try to amend our city code to make it similar to how Arlington has it, and more clear and effective for everyone in the city. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Davis? All right, thank you very much. That was very passionate. We appreciate your plea, and I guess the city attorney, do you have any thoughts on what we heard tonight? I know Arlington did do a rewrite of their ordinance.
And I think there's certainly some flexibility within the law, depending on how council believes they ought to. Obviously it was changed in 1998, and I know that the city's animal control officer, I think, feels that it should not be changed, but I think, that's something that council can decide how they want to handle it.
Okay. And hedgehogs specifically, I'm not sure. I don't know much about hedgehogs, but you want to come up and tell us a little bit about the hedgehog you want to get? Is it essentially a groundhog? No. Okay. Sorry.
So
Tell us about a hedgehog just a little bit.
hedgehogs sort of look like small porcupines. They have quills that aren't very pointy, and they cannot be shot out like porcupine quills. And they're insectivores. They can be fed a high-quality cat food in captivity. They don't need a lot of too much space. It's about like 4 square feet of space and a wheel to run on.
Mr. Mayor, after the meeting, we're going to show you a YouTube video of a hedgehog because it is just to live for.
They're
I'll tell you.
adorable.
They're
That thing's adorable. I don't see how you can
How can
outlaw
we
that.
outlaw that? All right, well, listen, I tell you what, I think this is a conversation just started, and we'll continue it on. Maybe you could have some follow-up conversation with the city manager about the specifics of what you'd like to see change, how you think it would be better, the law might be better served going forward. Certainly the hedgehog portion is something we know you're interested in, but there's other ideas, specific ideas. We can consider those as a council and try to see if there's ways that we can make this ordinance a little more accommodating to people in our community. But thank you so much for coming up. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yes.
Isabel, I just wanted to commend you for doing such thorough research on the ordinance, going back and reading minutes. Thank you for bringing it to our attention and taking the initiative.
Thank you for listening to me.
All right. Okay, our next speaker, our next group is a Planning Commission annual report. I think our chair, the Planning Commission is here. Mr. Wadiska, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor Tarter, Vice Mayor Conley, and council members. I will try to make this quick since I see you have a very full room of people wishing to make public comments. As Chair of the Planning Commission, I'm here to present the 2017 annual report. Hopefully you received a copy in your packet, but I'm not sure. It was, I think, submitted somewhere. Okay, you got it. Great. As you can see from the submitted report, the Planning Commission has been very busy in 2017 with 17 regular meetings and 29 work sessions, and that was compared to 18 last year. Many of these were regarding the subdivision for 116 Great Falls Street, but we also covered a lot of other issues. The major issue, as always, is our CIP review. And then in addition to that, we also covered the Broad Washington special exception, the railroad cottages, the City Hall renovation, the WNOD Trail Master Plan, the Downtown Plaza Park and Big Chimneys Park. We reviewed several subdivisions, worked on the comprehensive plan vision chapter, and last but not least, the Capital Bike Share program. We had many representatives of boards and commissions to keep us abreast of the issues that are important to good planning. In addition, we added a speaker series this past year, and we heard presentations on geothermal technology, transportation demand management. We heard from the Nova Parks on the WNOD Trail, and recently the Northern Virginia Conservation Trust. It is my hope that over the next year we can continue to expand this series as the Commission strives to understand the best practices in jurisdictions in the area and around the country. I would also now want to speak briefly about the future and what we intend to focus on over the upcoming year. Based on our discussion to date, the Planning Commission has several major goals. Number one, continue to work on the George Mason High School campus project. This includes both the new high school and the approximately 10 acres slated for economic development. Similar to last year, I anticipate this will be our major focus outside of the ongoing business of planning. The Commission plays a vital role in this project, and a considerable portion of our agenda at our upcoming annual retreat on Monday, March 19th, will be spent discussing the steps that are required to move this forward. We'll also be discussing the schedule that is required to make sure that this project adheres to what needs to happen so that it can move forward as planned. As has been repeated numerous times over the past few years, this is a project that could transform our city, and as such, it demands our full attention as the Commission. Secondly, the Planning Commission anticipates in the near term continuing the hard work associated with the next round of the Founders Row special exception and site plan. While a developer has been absent at our meetings for longer than expected, given the potential impact the project could have on the city's finances and the character of the community, the Planning Commission is committed to not be the entity that slows this process down through procedural hurdles. Our third goal is to continue our work on improving and updating the comprehensive plan. This guiding document must continue to be reviewed and refreshed in order to represent the ever-changing goals and objectives of our citizens. To this end, the Planning Commission reaffirms its commitment to being a forum where the citizens of Falls Church can continue to express their views on projects and developments that wish to alter our city. In the past, our meetings have generated great interest and been a place where concerned citizens can be heard and their point of view considered. Lastly, over the next year, the Commission will continue its focus on sustainability, both economic and environmental. Economically, we are committed to approving projects that will continue to positively benefit Falls Church and its citizens. Environmentally, with each project, we are becoming more and more steadfast in our requirements that the new construction in the community adhere to the highest environmental standards. While to date we have not made these wishes a formal submission request or requirement, applicants are becoming more and more aware that projects will not receive our approval if the environmental issues are not adequately addressed. Before I conclude my report, I also want to take this opportunity to thank our new planning director, Paul Stoddard, and the entirety of the planning staff. None of the accomplishments the Commission has achieved in the past year or will achieve in the upcoming one could be possible without our amazingly strong staff and the tremendous support they provide. Right now, this is especially true as they work through the relocation from City Hall and continue to maintain and support the large number of projects on their desks and in the pipeline. On behalf of my fellow commissioners, I thank you for your time and look forward to another year diligently serving the City of Falls Church and the City Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate both the Planning Commission's work in the city and particularly your leadership as well. So thank you so much. Other questions, comments from council members to Mr. Wadiska? Ms. Hardy, do you have a question? No?
I was just going to note that you'll be pleased that we're making an appointment hopefully tonight on getting your 7th Planning Commission member. So we appreciate your patience.
Terrific. That'll make sure we don't have any ties.
Mr. Duncan?
Thank you. I'd just like to say that many fine people have served on the Planning Commission in our community over the years that I've lived here since 1985. But I consider myself singularly fortunate to serve on council at a time when the Planning Commission, as currently constituted, is in office. I think you all are thoughtful and diligent and forethoughtful, and really appreciate the work that you do to advance the Vision 2040 that we all, worked on together. And I also want to thank the Appointments Committee, those who've served on the Appointments Committee, the Council Appointments Committee, because I know that a number of people want to be on the Planning Commission, obviously, because it's where the action is. And it's tough to choose some and leave some aside. And I just want to thank my colleagues who've made those tough decisions. Finally, just quickly, 2 areas that I would appreciate your help on as much as you can give us. One is the question of parking. I cannot think of a project or even a small development that starts up here without a discussion about, well, it doesn't have enough parking. And yet everything that we hear from futurists, people thinking down the road, certainly 10, 20 years, is that, structured parking is probably not going to be as much in demand 20 years from now as it is now because of changes in the way people get around and kind of vehicles that they use. Helping us kind of have that discussion with the community and get that thought out there would be useful. I'll tell the same thing to the CACT when they come up. And second, retail. What is retail of the future? There again is not a major project that comes up without us wondering. Experiential retail, curated retail, are all these buzzwords that the development community brings to us. And I'm not really sure that anybody knows exactly, what it is that's going to go into the buildings that we approve, which is, something we can live with within certain bounds. But, getting your assistance on a community conversation, what do people do when they leave their house? What do they buy? What do they do? Would be helpful, I think, for the council to have your assistance in that conversation so that we can, talk to developers more about what it is that we would like to see them bring in here.
Absolutely.
But thank you.
Yeah. That's it.
Mr. C.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to echo some of the thoughts of my fellow council members here. This is what you and the Planning Commission do is pretty much a second job. The vast volume of documents you have to go through, dissect, triage, re-examine, to know all the fine points of each and every piece of paper, and it's a lot of paper. And it's largely uncompensated for it. We understand that you do this because of a sense of loyalty and you want to be part of what is in the city that's forward-facing in the future, and that's echoed in the sentiments that you expressed with regard to the objectives of the Planning Commission. So I thank you for that. But this is a time when there is going to be much more demand on your resources, and for that we appreciate the ability of your leadership and those on the commission to continue to devote the resources necessary to get the job done for all of us.
Yeah, it's a very committed group. It's a wonderful group of people, have experience and show up at meetings that we're not necessarily directly involved with. It's a wonderful group of people and very dedicated to looking forward to improving the city in the future. So thank you.
All right, I think that's all we've got. But again, thank you. I look forward to working with you on the campus site in particular, but throughout the city for the next couple of years. So
Absolutely.
Anyway, appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, our next speaker is the Citizens Advisory Committee on Transportation, their annual report. And we say goodbye to our Cub Scouts. Thank you for coming up. We appreciate it.
Good evening, Mayor Tarter, Vice Mayor Connolly, members of council. Thanks for having me tonight. I'll also try to be brief. I know we have a packed room. So I'm Andrea Comont. I'm the chair of the Citizens Advisory Committee on Transportation as of last year. I'd like to also recognize my co-committee members, Paul Baldino, our vice chair, and Bill Ackerman, as well as Jeff Sykes, who is our wonderful staff liaison. They're all terrific. Thank you for being here. So this has also been a pretty busy year for the CACT. As you'll see in the annual report, one of our main goals is overseeing the neighborhood traffic calming program. We had a case, Maple Avenue case, which was the first one to go through the new neighborhood traffic calming program under the revised program from end to end. And so you'll see that there were some improvements made along Maple Avenue that including a speed bump and some bump outs that have improved everything there. We also dealt with Pennsylvania Avenue, finishing that under the old traffic calming program. And we started a working group for the Little Falls and Great Falls streets. In addition to those projects, staff also implemented some traffic safety improvements along Lincoln Avenue and West Streets, as well as on Annandale Road at the request of some residents and council. And those projects were very well received. If you look at the report, you'll see some photos that the Lincoln Avenue residents sent in with, they actually baked cupcakes that looked like crosswalks to celebrate the new, which was great. I mean, it was a very well done project. So kudos to Jeff for managing that. It was a big job. So looking forward, we're planning to refine the NTC. We've completed one project now, so we're kind of want to get a sense of what works, what doesn't, how can we make it better. So we're going to start having those kinds of discussions. As always, we'd like to renew our request to you to fund the NTC in the amount of $200,000. We would also like to see you increase staffing so we can address some of the backlog of the traffic calming cases that have been submitted to us. I believe we currently have 6 in the queue and 8 potential cases that are circulating petitions. So there's definitely a lot of interest in being part of this program. And I know that improving walkability in the city is a big goal for council, and this is how we do that. In addition to the NTC, we were working on a number of other different projects. We provided comments on a variety of proposed development projects, the railroad cottages, the Insight development. We also provided comments on the bike share stations and letters of support for the pedestrian bridge, for the WNOD over Route 29, as well as for the Nova Parks proposed dual trail. Our 2 members, Bill Ackerman and Steve Knight, also represented the CACT on the Streetscape Task Force. And we're also close to finalizing a PACE car program, which we may have told you about last year. I can't recall. It's been in the works for a little while. The idea is that residents will pledge to be courteous drivers throughout the city and basically obey the speed limit wherever they are. We also assisted staff who does the bulk of the lion's share of the work in Bike to Work Day, mainly by showing up and celebrating with everybody else that was there. It's always a great event. We also researched the concept of parklets, and we're hoping to make some recommendations this year on how the city can use parklets. If you're unfamiliar with the idea, it's basically you take a parking space in a central area and you kind of turn it into a park. And it's a way to maximize the public utility of what may just be like a boring parking space. It can actually be a lot more fun if you bring some creativity to the idea. We also explored the formation of a bicycle advocacy group with the Fairfax Alliance for Better Bicycling. Bill and Paul worked on that project, and that was really good. They're very open to having Falls Church City residents join their advocacy chapter. We may also work with them in the future on planning a social ride in Falls Church, potentially for families. We had a joint meeting with the Planning Commission, which we found to be very helpful. Looking forward, we're hoping to host a joint meeting with the ESC and as well as the HSAC. The ESC meeting will hope to discuss sustainable transportation, and the HSAC actually just reached out, or their staffer just reached out to Jeff to ask if we could talk about accessibility issues. So we're hoping to do more of those kinds of meetings going forward, because I think a lot of these issues are things that we're going to have to work together on to help give you better comments and advice. Finally, I hosted the Kickoff Play Streets event last April, and It was very well attended. We're going to hope to try to get more of those going in the future. So looking ahead, we're planning on being involved in the GMHS campus project. We're going to be working with the City Schools Health and Wellness Committee to plan a walk or bike to school day in May. We're hoping to make recommendations for Parking Day, which is the third Friday in September. We'd also like to plan a family social bike ride. We'll be, of course, overseeing the NTC program and hopefully making recommendations for how we can improve that. And we'll also hope to launch the Pace Car program. That's actually something that's not on the list here. So you'll see there are a couple attachments also to this memo. One is the walkability survey, which we conducted actually over the course, I think, of 2016. And the report is citizen findings from the survey of citizens in Falls Church. They gave our sidewalks relatively middling grades overall. Especially South Washington did not fare so well. There's also a memo about parklets, which I referenced earlier, as well as finally there's a memo from Jeff Sykes that responds to a request that Councilman Z made a year ago, asking if we could lower the speed limit, if we have the authority to lower speed limits in the city. And the opinion of the lawyer is that we are not prohibited from doing so. But there are many things to consider should we want to do so. And you'll see in the memo what those things are. I'm sorry, I'm over time. So you'll notice that a lot of the things that are on our list for goals for this year are sort of public educational events. And I'm curious what you think of those goals and what other things you would like to see us doing.
Thank you so much. You all have been busy, haven't you?
We have.
Yeah, I tell you, well, a lot of the things you're involved with are really the priorities of the city. You know, walkability, safety, health. So we're excited that all the great work you all are doing. I think the city really is moving a long way towards achieving those goals. Just even in the past couple of years, a priority for crosswalks and traffic calming and the like, I think is it's been noticeable to me at least. So we really appreciate the whole group's work, but yours in particular as the leader. I do have one comment, a fairly minor one, but you mentioned the bike walk to school day in May as a kind of long-term walker to school. I think it'd be great to also do that at the beginning of the year to get people in the habit of actually, doing that before the year starts.
There's a September holiday too.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. That's great.
So May was just sooner.
Got it. Well, that's great work. So anyway, we really appreciate it. Does there anyone else have any comments? Mr. Z and then Vice Mayor Connolly?
Thank you, Mayor. I want to applaud this very thorough and diverse report with all kinds of colored charts. For those that haven't seen the survey yet, this is the first time I think I've ever seen a survey where the ranking of awful is on there.
Is on the list. And actually, I should thank Jack Trainer, who was an intern with the Department of Public Works last summer. He did a lot of work with the walkability survey. He was wonderful. You guys have really great interns. I hear Paul Stoddard was an intern in the past.
So he would know what awful is. I think in particular the Play Streets initiative, I think is one that should be amped up and made better known to the people of our city, that they do have not only the right but the resources to be able to close off the streets for a better part of the day and have their kids just basically take over the streets. So it's a very powerful thing.
I agree, and that was sort of my baby, and so one of my goals definitely going forward is making sure more people know about it. You attended ours, I recall. It was a bit crowded actually, which was really fun.
Vice Mayor Connolly?
Thank you for that thorough report. I just want to particularly say thank you that you are working with other boards and commissions. I think that's really important as we go forward as a city, that people are looking and solving problems together instead of solving them in a silo. So thank you for taking that initiative and working with other boards and commissions.
Great, thank you.
Vice Mayor Connolly and then Mr. Lichtenhouse. I'm sorry, Ms. Hardy. Apologies. Councilmember Hardy.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Comont. echo all the other comments. I think this is terrific, and we appreciate how active you have been. It's exactly all the stuff that we care about, so we're glad that there's committed citizens working on this. A couple thoughts. On the traffic calming, come budget season, I'm sure we will be talking about the 200,000 requests, but I think it's certainly something that I support because I feel like we have a social obligation with the development happening in the city to make sure that we take care of the residential neighborhoods. What I'd love to probably get into more detail come budget time is the exact amount and the timing, because I know that we're going to get some grant money. And so let's figure out, between the resources that we have and what we think we can actually get done before the grant money comes in, how much we'll need, whether that's 200,000 or less, or the timing of all that. But
Right.
I'm certainly in supportive of that. On the working together part, 2 suggestions. One, I know you mentioned working already with the Health and Wellness Committee on the school side, so that's terrific. One thing that's been more of a personal aha for me is when we were doing the George Mason campus work, we compared our walk and bus radius compared to neighboring jurisdictions. And we are very generous in Falls Church. And I think everyone appreciates that. But frankly, it just costs us a lot of money, I think, and resources to run those buses when we compare ourselves to Fairfax and Arlington. People up to a mile will walk to school.
Yes.
And so as part of that work, I'd love for us to kind of benchmark ourselves and figure out, well, what can we do to get ourselves closer to that parity, if that makes sense. Does that give us some operational efficiencies? And at the same time, the savings that we get, we really should invest in actually making those corridors more walkable, not only for the students who may be walking to school then, but also for everyone in the city. So I think it could be a win-win, both to make sure we're saving money on the budget side, but also thinking about how to get funds for walkability. So I think that's a great thing that we're doing with the schools. And then in terms of looking at your 2018-2019 goals, a suggestion on something to think about, probably in concert with the ESC and EDA, is around autonomous buses and shuttles. I think that came up as kind of a hot topic at our retreat a couple weeks ago. And I know that Mr. Z's been working on trying to bring something to the city, but it feels like Falls Church would be a great test bed. I know the technology's there. I know they're looking at cities around the country for kind of testing out that technology. If we can get some kind of shuttle that would go along Broad Street connecting West and East Falls Church, that could be really powerful, both for the company who wants a test, but as well as kind of meeting that interest and demand that we've heard from our citizens. So I think that'd be a really fun and great thing to do in 2018 and 2019 for you all.
I agree. I think the city is unique in its adaptability to being a test bed for a variety of new technologies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Lichtenhouse?
Yeah, thank you. I think you guys may have one of the most important citizen committees here.
Thank you.
Especially with all the development going on, and as someone who's with kids that have enjoyed the play area on the streets, I think you guys do some really fantastic work. I'd really echo Miss Hardy's comments related to the budget. I would like to know, specifically around the specific projects that you guys have, those detailed costs, whether it's speed tables for traffic calming, the crosswalks, and have that as itemized as possible so we can make decisions around those individual projects. And in terms of prioritization for the citizens and the committee itself would be very helpful as we go into that.
Okay.
So thank you, and thank you guys for all the work that you're doing.
Thank
It's
you.
fantastic.
All right. Oh, Mr. Snyder, okay.
Thanks
Thank you.
much. In the run-up to the election in November, is going door to door, beyond the school bond issue and the tax rate, transportation and traffic calming were like the number one issue in addition to those two. So I want to thank you for that. We've worked very hard to get federal and state grant money, and so it'll be very important, as other council members have said, to really make sure we're prioritizing and we're getting the most that we possibly can. And as you well know, there's no one solution to the traffic issues here. It's really a multiple set of approaches. So thank you very much for your work, and I look forward to working with you.
Us too. Thank you.
Thank you so
Just a
Mr.
quick
Duncan.
question. Back to school day is May 19th. When is
May
back?
9th.
I'm sorry, May 9th.
I
When,
think.
when's back to work day? Is that? I
It's
forget.
close to then. Jeff? The 18th
Oh,
of
that's
May.
close. Okay, 18th, all right.
So we're going to be walking and biking everywhere.
I know. Hope the weather's good that week. We'd like to just say the same thing briefly that I said to the Planning Commission about mobility for all modes. I know that's your religion and you preach it, so go out and do it. Because that is, I think, the secret to being able to develop as we, I think, want and need to, while still getting around without sitting dead in traffic. I don't
I
care so
agree.
much whether people passing through town sit in traffic, but if people here are able to walk, bike, ride autonomous shuttles or whatever, I think that the quality of life here would be good. And I've learned over the years that when it comes budget time, you can never stress your priorities too early or too often, so I'd like to third the motion of Ms. Hardy and Mr. Litkenhouse, and say that neighborhood traffic control and calming should be a priority in this year's budget, and I hope that we will be able to do more faster. Federal grants and such are great, but we've learned that they take a long time to roll out. And, you know, at budget time, every, you know, all the needs are above average in Falls Church, schools, human services, and whatever, and I can hardly think of a more important need than getting people around town safely and promoting calm and tranquility in the neighborhood. So I would look at a figure of $100,000, and you tell us what it is that you would do with that if you were able to secure it in next year's budget, in addition to whatever the manager may have in mind. Or if the manager wants to, he could throw that in now, and we'd all be done. Anyway, thank you for your hard work.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much.
Thanks.
We're going to now move on to public comment. As I mentioned earlier, if you'd like to speak, please fill out one of the speaker slips. I've got 2 at the present. Certainly welcome to have more. Our first speaker is David Breeden. Welcome. Come on forward. Followed by Carl Salisbury. That's the only 2 speakers we have at the present. Welcome.
Hi. David Breeskin, live in Annandale, Virginia.
Again.
Yeah, here in 2018, we're still filling out forms by hand. I'm here as representative of the City of Falls Church Concert Band. We've been resident in George Mason High School going back at least to the 1970s. I joined the band in 1991, and it was already well established by then. We now, as we all know, the school is going to be torn down and rebuilt. We've got a storage cabinet, a storage closet in the old school, and we want to make sure we can still have a storage closet in the new school. I'm wondering, how do we go about doing that? I may be asking the wrong people, but my colleague Carl had suggested I come to this meeting and raise the issue.
So Vice Mayor Connolly works at the schools. I think she's going to pass that along. But if you were to have occasion to speak with folks at the superintendent, for example, or others, it probably would be good to mention it to them as well. But Vice Mayor Connolly, I don't know if you want to add.
Yeah, so once the school, it would be a great idea to send a message to Peter Noonan, who is the superintendent, and mention that, as well as to Mary Jo West, who is the band teacher at George Mason.
Yes, I know Mary Jo well. We go back to before she was even the teacher here.
There you go. So
we've also been working with Chris Madison at the rec department.
Excellent. So we have gone through that whole RFP and looked at where everything is. So it would be great as we go into the design and construction phase, which will be later this summer, just to make sure that what you have there, you can.
So it's Peter Noonan, you say?
Peter Noonan is the superintendent, Mary Jo West.
Superintendent.
Yeah.
And these are the people that we should be asking about getting space.
Yes, indeed.
All right.
Yep.
That's really all I have.
Thank you for coming.
All right.
Thank you for the great music you all
You're
put
quite
on.
welcome.
All right, our last speaker. Carl Salisbury. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Carl Salisbury. I live at the Broadway at 502 West Broad. And tonight I'm representing the City of Falls Church Community Band. This organization, as David has mentioned, has been around for over 30 years. And with the city support, the band performs annually at Cherry Hill Park, also on Memorial Day and Veterans Day, and occasionally July 4th. The band also performs at retirement centers like Goodwin House, the Virginian, and the Fountain, plus several others, as well as several Fairfax County parks. There's always a Christmas concert. In addition, several times a year, the band performs at Reagan airports for honor flights. Airlines celebrate World War II and Korean War vets by flying them to Washington and busing them to various memorials. The band gets to the airport at 8 o'clock in the morning, goes through security with instruments, music stands, and music, sets up at gate 37 or 38, and plays Sousa marches as the veterans come through the gateway. Now many of them in wheelchairs, and most of them wearing company and service hats, while another large group of volunteers wave and cheer and wave flags as these guys walk through the gateway. Almost everybody who sees it the first time tears up. The Falls Church band meets Wednesday nights in the band room at George Mason High School. And our music is stored there, and that's something what David just mentioned, is we're concerned about the storage of the music. We really appreciate the city support and hope that we'll continue to get their support. We've got a very talented team of conductors. Robert Little is our senior conductor, and David is our volunteer assistant conductor who has been the managing spirit of the band for most of its life. Without David, the band probably would not be there and definitely would not have the same quality. He's very important to the band. Now, St. Patrick's Day, as usual, is coming on March 17th, and this year it's a Saturday. And the band is having a St. Patrick's Day concert at the George Mason High School auditorium. It promises to be very entertaining, and to further the entertainment, we're going to be assisted by the O'Neill James School of Irish Dance, another Falls Church institution. So everybody's invited to this concert. We've got many very talented musicians in the group, but we're open to and welcome all levels, which probably is one of the reasons that I'm here. We've been practicing diligently for this concert, and actually it's been over a year since my wife Ellen has said, I'm going to the Harris Teeter now, and this would be a really good time for you to practice. But we expect it to be a really good concert, and we hope that y'all all come. We know that you will enjoy it. So St. Patrick's Day, George Mason, 7:30 at the auditorium. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We're looking forward to it. All right, that's all the public comment I have at this time. We did amend our agenda, so the next item, Mr. Shields, is actually, looks like TR 18-15. Is that right? Would you like to give any introduction to this matter?
Council, what's before you is a resolution that was drafted, and it was brought forward at the initiative of council members. Let me get the actual staff report in front of us. I beg your pardon. Councilmember Letty Hardy and David Snyder helped draft this resolution, and it was reviewed by staff. I would just note that our police chief, Mary Gavin, is here, and we do view this and the dialogue we've been having with community on these gun safety issues is very important, and it's a dialogue we're very committed to, and we think that it's a very effective dialogue as well. And so I don't have a lot more to add with staff report, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right. Any questions from Mr. Shields? Ms. Hardy, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I was going to ask Mayor whether, different from typical resolutions, whether I think it would be valuable for us to actually read the resolution.
Of course.
So if I may.
Yes.
So this is TR 18-15, Resolution in Support of Gun Violence Prevention. Whereas more than 150,000 students attending more than 170 primary and secondary schools have experienced a shooting on campus since the Columbine High School massacre in 1999. And whereas from Columbine to Virginia Tech to Sandy Hook to Parkland, the lives of hundreds of students and school employees have been lost to the plague of gun violence. And whereas among high-income nations, 91% of children under 15 years old and 92% of youth between 15 and 24 years old who've been killed by bullets lived in the United States. And whereas nearly 24 children are shot every day on average, and more than 22 million children live in homes with a firearm in the United States. And whereas the City of Falls Church and the Falls Church City Public Schools have prioritized improving mental health support, safety precautions, and education to prevent gun violence incidents from occurring. And whereas the Code of Virginia severely restricts through Section 15.2/915 the city's ability to protect its citizens against the dangers of gun violence. And whereas the City Council adopted Resolution 2717-45 requesting state legislation to allow the city to adopt an ordinance prohibiting the possession of firearms and other dangerous weapons in any city-owned or publicly leased property facility, including recreational facilities and libraries, city administrative offices, and the meeting rooms where council and other boards and commissions formally meet to conduct the city's business. And whereas the International Association of Chief of Police, IACP, of which the City of Falls Church Chief of Police serves on its executive board, advocates for the adoption of common sense policies to assist in reducing gun violence, including the prohibiting the sale of armor-piercing ammunition, reinstating an assault weapons ban, supporting state control of concealed weapons laws, and instituting stronger background checks and waiting periods. And whereas responsibility for preventing gun violence incidents cannot be relegated to school districts and local governments alone, localities should be given the tools to enact firearm policies that fit the needs of their communities. So a couple.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, so a couple things. There's a lot of, obviously, formal language in there, but two things I just really want to call out for both the audience here as well as council members is, number one, recognize the reference to the IACP position. So besides all the great things that our police chief already does for us, I think the fact that Chief Gavin supports that platform is really important. I think we should be proud of her work on the IACP and what the position stands for. So I wanted to call that out. And second, one of the whereas clauses called out the fact that, frankly, localities have our hands tied. So when it comes to taking action to protect our residents from gun violence. So as a mom who has to answer to when my kids ask me, Mommy, why can't you make a law that changes this? I feel increasingly frustrated and that my answer is insufficient because as a council member, we frankly can't do anything in Falls Church because of the laws in Virginia. In fact, there's a preemption statute that I think the resolution references that my colleagues and I are barred by state law from adopting any ordinance around that is around gun violence for our locality, which is unfortunate. So as advocates of gun violence, I think up here, I think you can expect that our annual legislative agenda will continue to include measures around gun violence, and so we'll continue to show support to our delegation in Richmond to support those. One thing I did want to call out, though, the majority of child deaths by guns are actually committed by kids with easy, unsecured access to guns. So while incidents like Park Lane clearly, catch a lot of attention and it's unfortunate, I think we need to listen to the kids there. But as adults, we can do more. One thing locally that we can do is, as parents and adults, and a community is really pledge to keep those guns safe and locked and out of kids' hands. And I know that our police department offers gun locks and other programs that kind of help with that. So that's one thing that I encourage us as a community to consider and really promote among our schools as well. So those things I just wanted to call out kind of among all the formal language in that resolution.
All right, thank you. Mr. Snyder?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. If it's appropriate, I would like to move approval of TR 18-15.
Great, I second.
And I wanted to make a couple comments, and perhaps we could invite citizens to comment as well. We sometimes do that with resolutions. So for the last several decades, the extremists have controlled firearms policy at the federal and state level and have, as Councilmember Hardy said a minute ago, prevented localities from doing those things which are essential for the safety of our citizens. Of course, this control by the extremists has led to less, not more, safety. Need I go through the school shootings, the church shootings, the concert shootings, and on and on and on. Frankly, now, things have to change. And if it starts here, so much the better. Consider this, if you will, a petition to those who have the authority to act. We don't. We start there with this. Several years ago, I made an effort to have the Council of Governments take a similar action. They voted in favor of it, and within 2 weeks they reversed themselves in what was not the proudest hour for our region. So let's begin anew. Unfortunately, we have way too many reasons to begin anew, and frankly, it's time for a change. Thank you.
All right. Anyone else like to make any comments at this point? Chief, would you like to say anything?
Thank you, Council. Thank you for making the strong statement and commitment to reducing gun violence. And, Falls Church is a safe community. Parkland's a safe community. Columbine, Newtown, no different. We all are those communities. And there's been 208 school shootings since Columbine, and not one statistic is meaningless. Every one of them is tragic. I am really honored to be the chief of police in the city of Falls Church, and we have a great police department and public safety disciplines in this region. I'm also honored to be on the board of directors for the IACP because they support common sense gun laws. But what brings me here tonight, especially too, is I'm a mom. And there's no greater strength than being a mom. You face your greatest fears because you're a mom. But what I also do know that moms have that great strength that is beyond the laws of nature, but they also change culture. In 1980, Mothers Against Drunk Driving changed the culture of drunk driving. And I can tell you these mothers behind you here and behind me that will change the gun laws. It's going to be a hard-fought battle, but they will change the culture because it's common sense. And there's a growing number of chiefs, and there's the most professional association of chiefs of police that support common sense laws when it comes to guns and gun control. Falls Church last year had 17 violent incidents with guns. And you forget how quickly it goes by. So every community across this nation is scratching their head and searching what can they do next. And I dare say it's going to be the mothers that change the culture, much like the Mothers Against Drunk Driving that changed the culture in this nation. So I applaud you for being here in support, and thank you for demonstrating the voice of the city, because it's going to be the people, it's going to be the laws, it's going to be our technology, and it's going to be action that actually makes the change for our kids to be safer. So thanks.
Thank you very much. I was at the event, as were many of my colleagues, last Monday, Moms Demand Action, and it was a deeply moving event and extremely well attended. So, in this world, if you want to get something done, ask a mom. And so it was a great event, and I tell you, I'm proud, frankly, of our kids here in Falls Church who are leading the way, and the kids in Florida. It's great to see the next generation stepping up to the plate and showing leadership. So it's an exciting time, I think, on this issue. And so I'm delighted to be part of this motion that I think we're going to pass in a moment or two. We have a very tight agenda. We have a lot to do tonight, but if there's someone who would like to speak from the Moms Demand Action, you're welcome to speak at this time. You don't have to, but if there's someone, maybe the leader of the group, if not, that's fine as well. But we do have a motion on the table. We do. Welcome. Come on down.
I can't pass. I want to take an opportunity to thank you all. I said it last week at the vigil, and your city's amazing support to us when we put that vigil together within 48 hours. Your school system, your police, your staff at the school were incredible, and everybody, without a doubt, said, no hesitation, how can we help, and what can we do for you to make this happen? So it is not that way everywhere. We know that that's the case, so we thank you so much for everything you do for us. It really means so much to us to have your support. And the other thing I want to say is that we have Kate here, who is our coordinator, who's working with our students at area schools. And before we left the vigil, we had a teacher and we had students ready at your high school, ready to start. And then that Tuesday, they had their first meeting, and they had 50 students at your high school ready to start a club. So, it really is remarkable what you have going on in your community. And again, we're thankful and so proud of them. So thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for... Welcome.
Hi, council members. I'm Claire Matten, and I'm working with Moms Demand Action right now at George Mason High School to start a club, Students Demand Action, to really just try to address this gun violence. I love how passionate a lot of you guys are about this issue, and I think it's really just so important in our community to address this. And so in bringing up the topic at our school, we've already seen a lot of interest. We're actually having our first interest meeting on Wednesday. Teachers Mark Silver and Maggie Webster have been behind me on this, and we hope to just speak out, be at the March for Our Lives on the 24th of March, and hopefully do big things with Moms Demand Action. They've really backed us on this and have been super supportive. So we're excited to see where this goes.
Thank you very much. So, of course, come on forward, Sean.
Hi, everyone. Haven't seen you for a while. This is a brief paragraph that I posted. I did attend the candlelight vigil. For me, it was very impressive. And I went home and posted something, so I'll just read it out to you. Forward, gun control. The school tragedy in Florida that took the lives of 17 students has sparked a furious outcry and backlash nationwide regarding gun violence and the mental attitudes of those who perpetuate the crimes. Tonight, George Mason High School here in Falls Church held a candlelight vigil spearheaded by Mums Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. Falls Church's own Don Beyer, who is Virginia's member of Congress, is in the House, isn't he? Sorry, made a mistake there. I'll correct that. Was a keynote speaker accompanied by mums who have witnessed those catalysms firsthand. I had a chance to speak with Don regarding various solutions to the insanity. He appreciated my idea for holding school classes starting at an early age, educating the kids about violence and gun control, bearing in mind that in the last 50 years, 1.5 million Americans have been killed in gun-related incidents. This would be similar to the sex education held here in the 1960s. I wasn't here at the time, so it's an idea I had. If this had commenced 11 years ago after the Virginia Tech shooting that took 32 lives, many of the gun violence situations could have been averted, definitely resulting in less crimes and less guns sold. The Second Amendment was all well and good when adopted in 1791 for the necessity of a well-regulated militia. But times and regulations have changed. Seems that regulations are out the window and muskets have been replaced by a myriad of assorted assault weapons. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That's from an Englishman's point of view.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, Vice Mayor Connolly?
Just to add to the chorus here, I've been on city council for 4 years, and in that time, we have heard so many times from people who are demanding action. You've come to city council meetings, you've held events, you've been at the farmers market. I see Carol Luton there and Sean Dagan, and you have been so involved and persistent. And I think, nevertheless, you persisted and you will continue to persist. So I want to thank you for that, and I want to pledge the support that I can give as well.
All right, thank you. Time to stand up and be counted. We have a motion on the table. Madam Clerk?
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Mr. Lickenhouse?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. Z?
Yes.
Mayor Tarter?
Yes.
And the motion carries. Thank you, Council.
All right, thank you so much. Our next item is council requests. Are there any council requests? Okay, seeing Mr. Z.
I just have one. It's pretty simple, actually. There are a limited number of citizens in our city that have their real estate taxes deferred, and because of their income, and it's a small number. But at the same time, the stormwater fee still remains on the books as a liability for these citizens. And I heard a story the other day that one of the citizens whose taxes have been deferred wanted to come in and set up a payment plan because she was unable to meet the $50 for the stormwater fees. So I would like to make that part of this budget process and to bring forward an amendment to the particular ordinance that allows us to defer, to excuse the tax because of that requirement to also include the stormwater fee. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Maybe the city attorney can check on the legality of that as well. Other requests? Mr. Snyder?
Sure. Just very quickly, we've been notified by one of our citizens that the Stop Gun Violence license plate bill will be before the Senate tomorrow, and I wondered if there's no objection. Our policy has been, I think, to support that. If we couldn't communicate that again, there's no objection. Secondly, since I was probably the only one on the council in 1998, and so I wanted to say that without questioning the wisdom of the council back then, frankly, laws need to change with the changing values and changing needs of our citizens. So I look forward to taking a look at this again to see what we can do. So I want to thank our citizen activists for bringing that to our attention. Thank you.
All right, any other council requests?
Just briefly.
All right.
I want to express my admiration to Mr. Snyder for fessing up that he was on the council. What Mr. Z said about tax abatement and relief, I think at least three others of us, in addition to him, of course, we don't talk, more than 2 by 2, but have asked the treasurer to provide some information about the scope of the current program and its cost, and I would just second Mr. Z's notion that we should talk about that and try to affix a number to the cost of expanding that program in the budget for FY 18-19.
Thank you very much. All right, unless there's any other comments, let's move on to the report of the city manager.
Thank you, Mayor Tarter, members of council. I'll go very rapidly just through a couple of items to update the council on. One, with respect to the Miller House, the closing on the transaction to convey the Miller House to community residences is set for tomorrow. I want to thank Dana Lewis and HHS for spearheading that all the way through and for all the support that project has had. But that will be, the key step in that project to moving it forward. Budget, just an update on that. Obviously, real estate assessments have been mailed out. The school board has adopted its budget request, and the CIP recommendations have been approved by the Planning Commission. And so the next step is for it all to come to you, and that is scheduled for March 12th, your next regular session meeting. The Cherry Hill playground equipment is open. I just want to recognize Danny Schlitt and Amy Maltese for spearheading that project. It is heavily used, and it's going to be a great spring out there on the Cherry Hill Park. And lastly, council requested a comparison of proffers, and we're working on that. And to move that forward on Thursday, we're having a meeting of regional subject matter experts on affordable housing to talk about how they handle proffers, and that's sort of a key piece in that study. And I just wanted to recognize our HHS staff and Sandra McLean in particular, who has assembled. It's no easy feat, but we're getting the housing experts from all of the capital region, including COG, and they're going to come right here to Falls Church to have that discussion. So I think we'll learn a lot from that discussion. Thank you, council.
All right. Unless there's anything from Mr. Shields, why don't I move on to items on the agenda, business on the agenda. Madam Clerk?
Yes, our first item is a public hearing on TR 18-16, resolution to determine that proceeding in a manner consistent with competitive negotiation is likely to be advantageous to the city and the public, and to authorize the issuance of the RFP in substantially the form presented to council.
Mr. Shields?
Thank you, Mayor Tarter. I'll make a few introductory comments. Then I think our city attorney, Carol McCoskey, I think will be able to comment on the specific requests in terms of the competitive negotiation aspect of this resolution and any other questions on the RFP itself. And we'd also like to allow Mr. Goldstein to just provide the council with an update on the campus project as a whole. But let me start with just an introduction on the RFP. The request tonight is to is for the council to determine that competitive negotiation in this instance is in the city's best interest, and to authorize the release of the draft RFP that's before you tonight. What is before you tonight does represent about 4 to 5 weeks of comment on the draft that we first put out in January. Every comment that we've gotten has gone through the filter of our outside legal and our outside commercial real estate experts that we've commissioned to help us with this document. Since the council last had a work session, there is a markup copy that is before you. A lot of them are just tweaks to the language. I think substantively what we have tried to do is address some of the requests that came to us, or the comments that came to us from the Environmental Services or Environmental Sustainability Council, that work group, and relating to sustainability and resilience. And we've worked through those comments. We didn't do all of their requests, but we tried to run it again through that filter that I described earlier. In addition, the Tree Commission has provided comments, which we have tried to embrace in this document. And then we've gotten comments from individual members of council. Again, the document has been out there in the public for about a month now, and so we think that hopefully people are familiar with it. The purpose of this step is to gather the development community. It's meant to be a fairly low barrier to entry. What we are asking for is people's qualifications, their financial strength and capability, and their approach, their philosophy towards this property, to help them express how they view this property and how it should be best used in its highest and best use. We do ask for some high-level conceptual development plans, but the evaluation criteria are principally geared towards selecting the best teams that we think bring the right skill set, the right experience, and the right financial capability to do a very successful and a wonderful and a transformative project up on the campus site. And so that's a quick summary. Let me turn it over to the city attorney just for a discussion of the specific request tonight and how it fits in with the structure that we're pursuing, and then answer any questions on that, and then provide a broader update on the project as a whole.
And the request to make the finding that competitive negotiation is advantageous in this case is based on a requirement that if you're going to use competitive negotiation principles as opposed to competitive sealed bidding principles, you need to make such a finding that it's advantageous. And the basis, as stated in the resolution, is really the complexity of this project and our ability to work toward achieving all of our planning goals and get the best deal that will benefit the city financially, because this isn't the kind of thing that can be put out for a, price alone bid. It is more advantageous to use competitive negotiation than competitive sealed bidding. And it's a requirement that if you're going to go that route, that you make that finding under the PPEA.
All right. Would you want to?
Would you like to get just a broader update on the project as
Yes,
well?
that'd be
And
great.
I'd like to invite Mr. Goldstein forward for that. And thank you, Mr. Goldstein, for all your work.
Thank you, Mr. Shields. Good evening, Council. Lee Goldstein, Project Manager for the campus site. So with the marketing of the site, just want to update on that. We're continuing to make direct phone calls to developers. We've got a lot of great feedback from the development community, excitement for this site from both folks locally and nationally. We provided direct mailings to about 80 plus development firms and architect and engineering firms with our marketing brochure. And we'll be pressing forward with social media and industry updates to different organizations like NAIOP and ULI and the like to get the word out this week. Jim Snyder provided an update at the chamber meeting on February 20th to share the project. So got a lot of excitement from local businesses about how they might be able to participate in the future. So for coordination, I want to just say that we had our kickoff for the Campus Coordinating Committee on Friday, the 23rd, and that is made up of groups, some folks here from the City Council, as well as folks from the School Board, PTA Association, Economic Development Authority, and the Planning Commission. It was a good kickoff meeting. We have a task list of items that we'll want to coordinate with going forward on shared infrastructure, how to potentially have some cost savings and do some innovative things that making sure the school site and the economic development site are designed effectively together to really be one site, one contiguous site. There was also a town hall on February the 25th in which Mr. Shields and Superintendent Newton gave an update on the project. Just very quickly on adjacent stakeholders, we're continuing to have conversations with WMATA, Virginia Tech, and county supervisors. Last week, the Fairfax County Board endorsed the city's NVTA application for grant funding for transportation improvements and walkability in the tune of about $15 million. So that's a good sign that they endorsed it. It still has ways to go for it to be approved, but that was good for us to get that first level through. In addition, our survey work and due diligence around sewer study continues to be ongoing through our Department of Public Works and our third-party vendors. I will stop it there and happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Vice Mayor Connolly?
First, I would really like to thank Mr. Shields and Dr. Noonan and others for putting together the Sunday series. I think that has been really effective for community members to have an opportunity to come and hear and ask questions. And people know, since there's a schedule that has been laid out for 4 months, if they miss the one in March, they can come to the one in April. And if they miss April, they can come in May. And I think that has been really effective. So I appreciate that that is occurring. Mr. Gold, two questions on the final RFP. How close is this one to the RFDP that will be issued in the second phase? There's going to still be a lot more work that goes into this.
Yeah, so the RFDP will be a lot more detailed around development program and particular aspects we want to see them come up with in the site. This is more about the qualifications and their conceptual approach to the site. But the RFDP will be another cut at the apple for folks to kind of dive a little bit deeper into some of the topics we've discussed, maybe about sustainability and walkability and transit and what types of density and housing we're looking at in office and commercial and getting more into the details. And so that's when they'll present a full development program with unit counts and full financial pro formas and the like.
So some of the comments that you're receiving from citizens and from boards and commissions may not be appropriate to go into this version, but would be more appropriate in the more specific version?
That's my understanding that we could potentially plug it into the more specific.
And there will be more opportunities for public comment as well.
Absolutely.
Leading up to the final RFDP.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I would just note also that as soon as the RFP hits the street, we'll use that time to immediately put that RFDP together, so we'll have a good long lead time for it as well.
Ms. Hardy?
Thank you. I echo the comments on making the Sunday series has been a good way to kind of get the word about this. So I appreciate the effort that goes from staff to kind of get those organized and set up. Couple questions and a comment. So one, I guess I'll start with the comment, is I appreciate the rework of the vision. I do think that it is much cleaner and inspiring. Makes me want to live there. So I think that's always good bar and good test of whether it's written well. So I appreciate the changes around resiliency, using the neighborhood language and things that we talked about last time. In the document when I read, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but I still think we probably should use some sort of technical editing. So a few places where I think there was like an extra comma and things like that that I trust that you all can comb through. A question on overall as we kind of approach the finish line. I know, Mr. Shields, you mentioned that we think this is a pretty low barrier to entry, but if we compare the size and length of this document to kind of other comparable ones, do we think that it's a pretty simple document? Like we're not going to be boring people with details or asking for too much and essentially prohibiting them from wanting to respond? Like what's our sense of how this compares to other things that might be out there?
I will say that in terms of the public sector taking land to the market it's rare. It's more typical that private sales would not have a document like this and wouldn't have a process like this. But having said that, we have tried to, with Alvarez and Marcel and with Bob Wolf, we've tried to keep the language understandable and not a whole lot of jargon that only we can understand. We've tried to make it clear, and there's been a push to keep it simple. I think through the comment process, we have made it a bit more complicated possibly than we initially anticipated. But we do think there's value in this document for the things that we think are going to be important down the road, that we put them here so that we're not adding them late. As Mr. Goldstein stated, the RFDP will be a really important document as well, and we can refine these concepts and we can express them with more detail in the next step in the process. But it is useful to put things on the table now that we think are going to come up later.
Yeah, and we don't want people surprised, right? We want to know, kind of tell them what we're looking for so that down the road they're not surprised when we suddenly ask for more. So I think it's that we talked about last time, that important balance in making sure that we're asking for the right amount of detail that doesn't deter anyone from responding. So I think the document looks good. I'm glad that we're kind of getting close to the finish line. So as we approach the finish line, 2 questions. One on the RFDP. I know that sounds like you're going to start working immediately on the next turn of this, and so I look forward to that. The evaluation committee, so we probably have a couple months before we actually need them up and going when responses come in. Is that going to be something we'll discuss in work session coming up on the makeup of the evaluation committee?
Yes.
Okay. I think that's it for now. Thank you.
Mr.
Just
Z?
a very quick point about your point, so well taken about the kind of grammar. It is with the copy editor right now with our consultant, so hopefully that gets some of those.
Yeah, because you shouldn't rely on us to
Appreciate it.
copyright or technical edit, so thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. C?
Thank you, Mayor. Maybe a silly question, but the final draft is the one that's dated 2/26 that's in front of us here?
Yes.
Okay. Because there are a bunch of others floating with earlier dates, but they're they're only for reference, I presume.
So the 226 clean copy is the latest, and then the one that was put at your dais that has the date of 222, that's the markup copy, but that also is the latest.
Right. Well, I want to say that even though this has been drafted and reviewed and improved by committee, when I say committee, I mean individuals to citizens that live in the city, those with a passion about a certain subject, those that think that the topic that is important to them, that in the greater scheme of things should be part of a balanced document, that this has been subject to review by those in the development industry, certainly our consultants who are encumbered to get this out in the best possible manner. And I want to thank the effort that you've made, Mr. Goldstein, and in particular the city manager and city attorney, to try to accommodate all those desires. I think the version I'm looking at here, in my thinking, properly reflects all the comments that have gone before, and I think you've done a masterful job in getting the nuance necessary to entice the developer community to participate. So I'm fully in support of this final draft.
All right, other comments? Go ahead, Vice Mayor Connolly, if you like.
I want to echo what Ms. Hardy said about appreciating the project vision and how you tightened that up. I do think, do we need to have in the project vision something about the proximity to the West Falls Church Metro Station? We don't have anything about transit-oriented development in that paragraph. Seems missing to me. Others have written it, and it's pretty well balanced, but I think maybe transit-oriented needs to be in there somewhere.
Yeah, we could add that.
Thank you.
All right, what else?
Yeah, just a couple things. Can you guys clarify the review process for the detailed proposal? Because I've been fairly pleased, having been able to drill down on this on multiple occasions with you guys collectively here, and getting feedback. And I'm pretty good overall in terms of a conceptual RFP, but there are a couple of things that I really want to make sure that we have an opportunity to discuss at length and in detail related to some of the financial components associated with the RFP, specifically discussion of a special taxing district, and then also a ground lease provision that's mandated by state law that forwarded over to the city attorney that we need to look at before making any decisions on the medium of transaction for this site. So can you kind of give me an understanding of how much of an opportunity we're going to have to really dig into the details and how many discussions we're going to have when it's going to be brought into work session and council? Because what I don't want to do is end up approving this, and even though the detailed proposal is much more in depth, the runway is much shorter, because I think that the evolution from this document to the next document is much, much more important in terms of making sure that we've gotten everything buttoned up so we get exactly what we are looking for when those proposals come back.
I think there's going to be lots of opportunities for us to continue that discussion. And there is one other thing that we're anticipating is, and we have for the whole process, is that we will learn things in this conceptual phase, and that will inform how the detailed proposals are crafted as well. And so, you know, we're looking forward to seeing what the market says initially and learning from that.
And I am working to get something out to you all, at least initially, with just information regarding special tax districts, how they work and what's available. And from there, I think we'll be, as we develop that RFDP, talking more about what's the best thing to ask for and what we should use strategically.
And I think the findings on the ground lease discussion, I think, need to be circulated as well, so we can have that discussion on the record as well. In terms of timing, Lee and Wyatt, what is, so you're going to start working the detailed proposal as soon as the thing goes out the door, right? We're going to be learning as we go. So from public perspective, what can we expect in terms of timeline around that discussion?
I would like to have time with our consultants to put the structure together, and so we would need a matter of weeks to do that. And then, so I think we'll be able to have a draft in the April timeframe, and then that gives us, you know, the intent is to issue the RFDP in mid-June, so that would allow for a, all of May and half of June to have a discussion of the RFDP.
It's still a pretty short runway, but we'll have to work with it, I guess. So.
Yeah, and we can, you know, as through the month of April, as the draft is coming together, we'll be having discussions.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Mr. Snyder?
Yeah, really questions. Is there anything in here that precludes a largely or totally commercial project?
No.
Okay, thank you. Second question. Is there anything in here that emphasizes the importance of net tax yield?
Yes.
Finally, the issue of public information is dealt with in several provisions. Have we gone as far as we can conceivably go, consistent with getting in as many responsible proposals as possible, in terms of providing public information? And I know 8.4 in particular deals with that. So is there any further pushing of the envelope we can do there? And then one other question. This version that we have in front of us, does it have the unanimous support of our expert consultants and city staff on this, as well as the city attorney?
Yes.
Thank you.
And I think in terms of if we've gone as far as we can go in 8.4, I think we have generally, but some of the determinations have to be made as the proposals come in, depending on what the developer requests to be confidential. But we will be pushing them at that time to make as much confidential as possible.
Or as much public as possible.
Public, I'm sorry.
Yes. Good correction. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments, questions? I'm going to open up to the public. This is a matter that we are going to be voting on shortly. Is there any member of the public who wishes to address this matter? Seeing none, the matter is closed to the public. Is there any additional, again, questions, comments? If not, is there a motion?
Mayor, I move to adopt TR 18-16.
We have a second?
Second.
All right, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. And if I can get a copy of the last draft for the record so that we can attach it. Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Mr. Lickenhouse?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. Z?
Yes.
And Mayor Tarter?
Yes.
The motion carries. Thank you, Council.
Thank you. Next item, please.
Yes, sir. We have TR 18-13, resolution to authorize the city manager to execute the memorandum of agreement with the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission, NVTC, regarding coordination of technical analysis, testing, funding, and administration for Phase 3 of the Envision Route 7 project.
All right, welcome.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor and council members, as you recall, last week we had a work session on this project. Dan Goldfarb of NVTC was very passionate about the project at this point. He's put a lot of time into it over the years and so on and gotten it at least through Phase 2. We're trying to embark upon Phase 3 of the project, which involves moving into more detail on the design of the project. So basically where we are at this point after Phase 2, which was completed in January of last year, is there's been a mode adopted for the project, which is bus rapid transit. It connects Tyson's Corner to Marks Center in Alexandria via the East Falls Church Metro Station. Follows the Route 7 corridor, obviously. The selected alternative is BRT, bus rapid transit. There's one of the features of connecting to East Falls Church is that it would actually increase ridership by 38% compared to non-connection in the corridor. We also found out from Phase 2 that BRT is the most cost-effective and competitive option. What would it do? What are the benefits? Well, it moves more people, provides a faster service, high-quality service, and increases transportation choices. The Phase 3 conceptual engineering study, which is basically why we're here tonight, would do the following things. It would define the project cost further. It would identify potential areas of concern, and it would provide guidance for preserving right-of-way for future construction. The conceptual engineering study would provide the following things. Conceptual design plans at 10%. Idea what the typical cross sections would look like, what the right-of-way needs are, as well as the options, where the station locations would be, and also a refined cost estimate, as I said, and also some limited traffic analysis at key intersections. Again, in looking at the total corridor, the Route 7 corridor for this project, there are 4 localities that are involved. So, of course, the City of Falls Church, Fairfax County, Arlington, and the City of Alexandria. NVTC has calculated that the Falls Church share of the study is $23,000. In terms of timing, the next steps would be the following: secure the jurisdictional contribution, assigning the MOA, awarding the DRPT grant. Let me step back a little bit. The project has been funded at $300,000. There's a DRPT grant which has been granted already, but there's a local match of $150,000, of which I said the Falls Church share is $23,000. After the grant, we'd move into the RFP and then project execution, and ready to begin the final engineering and environmental studies at the end of 2019. And that's the time But we need to get the MOA signed so the NVTC can move ahead to award the contract to the vendor at this point. That's a quick kind of summary of kind of where we are. I left out a lot of history that Dan covered last week. I'd be happy to answer any questions at this point.
Thank you very much for your work on this project, your presentation this evening. Does anyone have any questions? Ms. Hardy?
Thank you, Mr. Sykes, for last week's work session and this presentation as well. So you mentioned the $23,000 that is our share towards this third phase, and it's coming from special transportation funds. Is that operating dollars? Where is that coming from? What is special transportation funds as a category?
We put monies from the NVTA into the transportation fund, and I don't recall, Ms. Balbo, are we using 30% funds?
Yes, it's 30%.
So we'll be using NVTA 30% funds for our local match.
Got it.
Right.
And I'm just going to reiterate the comments I made last week, is that while I definitely support kind of the regional opportunity to look at how to get more people through Route 7, I would encourage us to think about a different kind of payment structure, I think, and funding structure if this thing goes off the ground in 10 years. How do we fund it? Because I think having us contribute such a large share of it for the amount of value we get for our citizens, it seems disproportionate. So I'm sure we'll get to a different funding structure. We'll have a separate discussion when it comes time to negotiating that. So that's kind of point number one. My second point is I want to reemphasize the part about technology. So based on the discussion in work session, this is 10 years away. And so by the time that it actually gets off the ground, I want to make sure that buses aren't going to be obsolete. So who knows where we'll be between self-driving, autonomous vehicles and ride sharing, but I feel like those are going to be more commonplace than we think.
Right.
And so I want to make sure that in this engineering study, we think about the capital costs of what autonomous vehicles could look like, an autonomous bus, versus the traditional ones we have, so that when it actually launches, or if it launches, that we're not 10 years behind.
Yep.
Thank you.
One other point I wanted to mention was it was brought up last week that the route that's been selected along Route 7, obviously, does not include a connection to the West Falls Church Metro. It's not in the MOA or the scope of work at this point, but we did get a commitment, and is reflected in the staff report, that NVTC has made a commitment to evaluate the mobility and accessibility of connecting the Route 7 BRT to West Falls Church Metro. So we'll stay on them on that as far as in the engineering process. But I did want to bring that up because that was certainly a concern of the council last week.
Okay, other comments, questions? Mr. Duncan?
I appreciate your responsiveness to that concern, which several of us shared. I don't know. This is maybe going to sound like a small thing, but I mentioned it last week, so I'm going to mention it again. Whatever this thing ends up being, and I think Ms. Hardy's right, it probably is going to end up being some sort of drop-off for autonomous vehicles.
Right.
But still, I think that there will be, places where that activity is organized. We're not just going to let autonomous vehicles dump people all along Broad Street, 10 years from now. That'd be chaos. And to that end, I'm going to again make the point that we have 5 stations, as this map shows, in the city of Falls Church, and not one of them is named Falls Church. So, I kind of envision this thing as like the Metro, East Falls Church, West Falls Church. I understand that West Falls Church does not connect to the Metro, but I'm just going to put, another plug in for the name of that station, place, drop off, whatever it is, to be not Haycock Road, which most people have no idea what it is, to just West Falls Church. It doesn't have to say West Falls Church Metro or West Falls Metro like East Falls Metro, but your job is going to be a minor to medium irritant about that when you go to your staff meetings and tell them that somebody is cranky about that and would really like it to be called West Falls Church. And your mention of cross sections of what the BRT would look like is, again, something else we talked about last week.
Right.
Showing people what it would look like as a bus system. Let's just say that it turns out to be that, or it starts that way.
Right.
Let's just show them what it looks like in Falls
Again,
Church, not just at Bayless Crossroads and Seven
Right.
Corners.
Again, getting through the city is a challenge because obviously Broad Street, Route 7 is 4 or 5 lanes. Same on North Washington Street. So that does pose a challenge. It would more than likely, the BRT would operate in a mixed car bus lane, if you will.
Yeah.
Outer lane. And
Yeah, I'm
so-
assuming that our cross-section is not going to look like a whole lot. It's just going to look like kind of the street looks now, maybe with a stop treatment that
That's
is,
correct.
you know, spiffy and modern and Jetson-like.
Right.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Z?
Well, I want to thank, at the very beginning, the work that you've put into this, Mr. Sykes, but in particular, the work that Councilmember Schneider has influenced this document and in his participation on regional and transportation-specific committees. And this document reflects a lot of his input. I do agree that we should proceed to invest some of the city's money, some of the taxpayers' money, so that we will know what it is that we don't know and what it is that we should know.
Right.
As you said earlier, this gets us to roughly 10% of the conceptual engineering design. $23,000 for 10%, you know, someone can do the math and figure out it's, you know, well in excess of half a penny on the tax rate to get to the rest of it. So it is going to represent a noticeable investment on the part of the city. Not to mention the estimated 250 preliminary cost estimate show cap cost of $250 million. So now that and we all know what happens to preliminary cost estimates by the time you actually get to real close cost estimates. I only mention this because I think a cautionary note is necessary here, that having done this does not mean that we're going to do all of the rest, that we're going to proceed along this path with deliberation and careful thinking. But where we are now, I think it is a necessary first step to understand where we are. Thank you.
Other comments? Mr. Lichtenhouse?
Thinking a little further down the road, that if this is actually implemented, in terms of our role in the design of what this route looks like, and I just think specifically about Leesburg Pike, Broad Street, right? The fact that it is 4, maybe 5 lanes, so we don't have any really drop off. And I think the comment, because I'd asked about what these buses look like, the frequency of transportation, and I think you guys had said they were running basically every 5 to 10 minutes down Broad Street, these buses.
Right.
How much input, assuming that this is funded 10, 15 years from now, project takes off, it gets started, how much say does the City of Falls Church have in terms of the design of what that route looks like? Or is it essentially out of our hands because it's a decision made for the greater good? Because I just think about buses traveling down Broad Street every 5 to 10 minutes. Seems to me is a little jarring. And it would require some redesign of the streetscape, in my opinion. So, you know, before this kind of bus leaves the station, no pun intended, what's our say, you know, 10, 15 years down the road if this is approved in terms of how that route, what it
Well,
looks
again,
like?
the city sits on the Technical Advisory Committee that NVTC has developed for this project. We've been involved, or at least I've been involved since I've been here, and been to several meetings, have been a number of public hearings and so on at schools up here. I'm sure we will have considerably amount of influence about what happens on our streets, on Broad Street, Washington Street, where this route will run through the city. Also, probably have input as to station locations where the bus stops are, as well as what they may look like, or if we're doing any special station stops. So there's a lot to be done. This is, to me, this is really the interesting part, because we're actually going to see something on paper. It's not just a picture, it's going to be actual physical dimensions and design and stuff like that. So it'll tell us where, not only in Falls Church, but all along the corridor, where the deficiencies are, where the challenges are. How do you get from East Falls Church through 7 Corners, that sort of thing. So it's a real design challenge here, and I think it'll be quite interesting.
Thank you.
Other comments, Mr. Snyder?
Sure, thanks a lot. Excellent questions on the part of all council members, and I think there'll be a good record of this going forward as to the kinds of expectations that we have that are specific to Falls Church. Just a couple quick points. I think people were talking about already bringing back some sort of shuttle service to serve our commercial areas and the two metro stations, and I think this can serve that purpose and actually be very good from a business development standpoint. Secondly, I think everybody understands that there cannot be a dedicated lane in the city of Falls Church at this point, and I think, believe me, I think people fully understand that. Third, I am very excited, and a couple council members have made this connection about new technology. It may be possible to actually move this thing along more rapidly. It may be possible as a result of technology to have much smaller, more nimble vehicles. And it could be the kind of testing ground that I think a couple of folks have indicated. So I think that point's well taken. I think there are some good environmental aspects to this, and the whole idea is to make this an attractive alternative to people getting in their cars, and will, I think, help feed our businesses to a significant extent. So I think it's great that we can move forward and we can use these funds. People understand the limitations here, but I think there's some opportunities, and I already sense a growing public interest in the part of better serving and connecting our commercial areas to the region and to the region through the metro station. So I think all that can be part of it, and I thank all the members of council for raising important issues that are now on the record. And I want to especially recognize Councilmember Z and thank him and his work on environmental issues, and hopefully the Environmental Sustainability Council can be involved in this as well as the transportation folks as we move forward. So thank you.
All right, thanks very much. Anyone else have any comments to make? I'm going to open it up to the public. Is there any member of the public who wishes to speak to this issue? Seeing none, the matter is closed to the public. About all I would have said has been said, so I don't think there's much need for that. Why don't we go ahead and move to a vote? Is there a motion to be had on this topic?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I move approval of TR 18-13.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, Madam Clerk.
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Mr. Lichtenhouse?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. Z?
Yes.
And Mayor Tarter.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you, Council.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Sykes. All right, let's move on to the next item. Will you
Yes,
call the
we have
next-
TR 17-48, resolution to adopt fiscal policies for the City of Falls Church.
All right, welcome, Ms. Bawa.
Good evening, Mayor Tarter and members of the council. We have for you this next item that provides a review of the financial policy in light of the fiscal year in 18 to 22 capital improvement program that authorized over $140 million in debt issuance for the major capital projects. We have worked with the city's financial advisors, Davenport LLC, to provide a proposed policy which is highlighted as part of attachment A, attachment to the resolution, with the amendments highlighted as track changes. So essentially, the key features of the policy are that in the years that the debt service to expenditure policy or the debt payout ratio policies are not in compliance, we would be required, the proposed policy proposes, the changes proposes is that we'd be required to maintain a current available balance of between 15 to 20%. And current available fund balance refers to all available reserves, including both the unassigned fund balance and the capital reserves that we have currently. And the city shall be required to comply with the proposed policy only in the years that the debt service to expenditure ratio and the trial balance, the debt payout ratios are not met. And this policy would still allow us for up to 2 years to come, if in the years that we toggle back and forth between the two policies, it would allow us for 2 years to come to our floor of 15%, or 12% if we go back to the other policy, and then 3 more years to come back to the target of 17% or 20%. With that, I'll conclude. We have staff from Davenport, and we are available to answer any questions you may have.
All righty. Thank you very much. Do we have some questions? Mr. Duncan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks to the Budget and Finance Committee and staff for their hard work on this over many, many months. And I know that I've been a particular, I don't know quite how to describe it, irritant on some of these questions, and I appreciate
It's a nice way to put it.
That's right. I get to call it as I see it. I appreciate your responsiveness to my concerns. So just, I guess, a comment and a question to make sure I understand. The key, to me, change in the policies is that inclusion, as you referred, of the water sale proceeds into the, what do you call it, the current total current total available fund balance. That is something that we have up to now not counted into our 12 to 17% band. Is that right?
Yes, the current policy only refers to unassigned fund balance,
Right.
the general fund.
And
unassigned.
so we are increasing our reserves from 15 to 20, but we're tossing in the 9 million or so from the water sale to help us reach those numbers.
That's the 9 million? No.
Mary Beth is nodding yes. She wants to hear that.
So this includes the unassigned fund balance, this includes the capital reserves and the permit reserves that we have in place. Of any available reserves.
Any available reserves,
Yes.
including the water sale proceeds, which,
The 9.2 in the water sale proceeds has been used towards the retirement fund. So that's not the money that's in here. If
That's why I paused in my response. If
Okay.
you're referring to that, no. That money is in the pension fund, but everything else that Ms. Bawa has referenced, including the 10 million that is in capital reserves, which is from the water sale proceeds.
sorry, okay, so the 10 million is the number that I was
That's,
reaching
okay.
for.
So if we're clear on that, yes.
Okay, so, I think I understand that. Just to make sure I understand, the most important page in the document that you've given us, I think, is the one on page 10 from the Davenport folks' material, which shows us a financial impact of the risk that we run if we don't do what you want us to do here tonight, as I understand it. Basically, you all are going to go meet with ratings agencies sometime in late April, and that's a really important meeting because if they are not somehow impressed with our posture or policies, then they could downgrade us. And if they downgraded us as much as 2 notches, this chart here shows that the cost in extra borrowing would be $385-ish thousand in the first year, and every basically year thereafter it's in the $300,000 range. So that obviously is, a penny on the tax rate every year right there just because we were downgraded. So, we kind of have a knife to our throat. We don't really, except for coming in with, professional staff and consultants and so forth, we don't. We're at the mercy, basically, of the ratings agencies to hopefully be impressed with what we've done here. And if we don't do what you want us to do, there's a risk that we will see a downgrade of the bond rating, and the costs associated with that would be at least around a penny on the tax rate.
And it also jeopardizes our debt capacity for future capital projects.
Right. That's just, this says, this is modeled right at a full $163 million borrowing. So am I right? The page 10 chart presumes that we borrow everything all at once next year, which we're not going to do, but
Right, no, and you're
just for arguments.
You're not, but just for the purposes of
Right.
putting something out there to give you an order
Illustration.
of magnitude. Something you said struck a chord. There's a risk when we go have those conversations that you're currently on positive outlook with Moody's, which is the only agency that doesn't have the city at a AAA rating. But for each and every one of the 3 rating agencies, we could tell a very good story, and they could still take negative action. I mean, this policy change pardon me, does not take that risk completely off the table. What this does is put you in the best light to give them comfort that you can afford this debt, and you can afford it in different economic cycles and so forth. And hopefully that, along with the story around the economic development project and all of that, will be enough to collectively give them comfort to keep you where you are, and hopefully at Moody's take that last step to get you up to AAA. But there can be no guarantees.
Giving comfort, that's what we are about the business of doing here. So, okay, I'm sure others want to speak to this. Just wanted to ask one other question right now, and the other things maybe others will bring up. Well, on page 5, thank you for I'd asked for illustrations of other jurisdictions, who'd faced big capital projects and how they did it and, how it turned out. The bad news that I learned is that Fairfax City undertook their very ambitious capital program at a time when the standards were looser than we are operating under, so sadly, we missed the boat on that. But I was pleased to see that the example of Leesburg, Virginia includes their plan was a 3-year plan to increase taxes to a total of 5 cents. Due to a better than anticipated growth in assessed valuations, the town did not have to adopt any of the planned tax increases. Now, I'm not proposing that we're not going to have some tax rate increases to undertake our very ambitious program, but I do think that's a good example of, let's take this in measured steps. Let's not pull in more money from the taxpayers than we need to at any one time. Let's just be mindful of that, because it's possible that if we continue to do our job here and the economy doesn't collapse, we will have good revenues, we'll have increased assessments, the community will continue to thrive, and we may find ourselves sitting here 3 or 4 years from now in a better position than we now might imagine. So let's at least contemplate that as we work on this year's budget and next year's budget also. That's your commercial advertisement for what's coming when the budget comes out. One of my former colleagues here asked me after the PTA meeting, and I just wanted to throw this out there. These fiscal policies don't speak to the impact of the federal tax law changes at all. And I'm just wondering, I assume that about a year from now, people are going to be doing their taxes and figuring out, how much more they're going to have to pay thanks to Mr. Trump's tax bill. And a lot of folks are probably not going to be happy. I don't know how many, but if the impact of that change at the federal level is significant, we would contemplate, I hope, looking at our fiscal policies again, just to see how they hold up in the light of this potential new era. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. In fact, in general, the policy calls out for bringing an update at when the new council members join the council. And also, we plan to bring a review of the policies at every major tax debt issuance for this major CIP that we have. So tranche, this is in preparation for the tranche 1, and then we'll bring it again for tranche 2 and 3.
Right, we have a measured
Yes.
plan of attack here that gives us opportunities to, and I'm not going to ask any gotcha questions of the manager, but you have the advantage of, holding your cards on the budget until March 12th. And I'd like to vote for this in the context of knowing what this year's budget's going to be. I just would, because I've asked several times, is there anything in here that's going to constrain or dictate what the council's going to do? And the answer is always no. Council can always do what it wants to. Well, of course, that's fundamentally true. But, at some level, whenever I read that, the language on line 64 in the staff report, committing year-end underspending and or revenue surpluses to reserves would allow the city to remain in compliance with the policy. I understand, what that means. It's not new. It's the way our policy's been. As long as everybody understands that the council, reserves the right and has the authority to, in consultation with the staff, make movements of monies that are underspending or surplus, or call it what you will, to meet needs that the body determines are pressing enough to warrant immediate expenses, rather than putting it into reserves. And that's a long way of asking the question that I've asked before, which is that an accurate way to describe the relationship between the council and the manager and budget areas?
Yes, well, I would, in terms of your question about whether this policy has a direct bearing on FY19, what I would say is that what these policies allow the council to do is accomplish your long-term goals. It will not have a direct impact on FY19. All of the decisions that have been made for the last 30 years mean that the city is in compliance with its policies. It means that the city's in strong financial condition. It means that the city can even contemplate doing the capital projects that we're moving forward on. That's the history of the city, and that's why we are who we are and where we are today. I think all of our expectation is that we'll continue to be in compliance with these policies, and we'll continue to be a strong and financially well-managed city so that we can do good things for the taxpayers of the city and meet their needs.
That's a very good soundbite. That's the one that I wanted to hear. And no, seriously, this needs to go out into the community as something that we're doing not from a position of weakness, but, it's a big thing we're doing. We understand we're small, it's big, but we are in a position of, fair strength as regards what we're trying to do. And the community needs to have confidence that we can do it. And obviously the ratings agencies, we hope will have that same confidence. Just one other thought or question when Letty said something about the length of the document. The other document made me ask, and we do have 10 fairly dense pages of fiscal policies. Is that kind of as much as, about the same as, or more than the kind of fiscal policies that the ratings agencies are used to seeing from a community our size?
I would say that they are comparable with highly rated credits. So no different. I think they want to see comprehensive fiscal policies that cover a number of things, not just reserves, but also, the debt policies and et cetera. So I would say that, the length is comparable to other highly rated credits.
Okay. Thanks very much. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Other comments? Ms. Hardy?
Great, thank you. I'm going to try to, again, summarize where we are because we've talked about it for so long that I think for the general audience it would be helpful. And then I do have some questions and comments. So the way I understand the gist of the changes is that we are essentially adding the ability for us to adhere to a different kind of balance calculation. So this 15 to 20% for total available balance is a new way of calculating what we should save. Right now, we have this rainy day fund, which we're adhering to kind of this 12 to 17%. And the policy changes, as stated, is that when we break one of those policy limits around debt to expenditures or payout ratios, i.e. we're taking on too much debt or can't pay back in time or pay back fast enough, then we toggle over to this 15 to 20% calculation. So that's kind of the layman's term. Is that correct?
That's right.
So I wanted to call out, and I mentioned this to the Vice Mayor, who's the Chair of our Budget and Finance, on line 50 of our, the staff report. It's a pretty, I think it's an error. Hopefully it's an error. But it actually only calls out 20%.
It should say 15 to 20%.
It should say 15 to 20. That's important because there's going to be years where we are going to be below 20, just slightly. And I want to make sure that's clear, that our policies, I think, later on in the actual policy document are fine. But I think in the staff report, I want to make sure everyone has a clear and consistent understanding that the policy is with it between 15 to 20%. So if we have years that are at 19 or 18, that should still be fine, right? Because I think that saying that we should be at 20 is a very different
line
thing.
271
Yep.
kind of makes that clear.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that
Where
from
the changes are highlighted.
the people who
Track.
review a staff report, so summarize it, that people understand it. Because I think as you go on from line 50, it calls out how we're going to be just below 20% in FY21 and line 62. So I think that's an important call out and distinction and correction for later. The other thing I want to call out, which is, I think, one thing that we discussed at the last meeting, but since we've had, I guess, another official meeting for this now, confirm that it's either the 12 to 17% unassigned fund balance policy or the 15 to 20% total balance policy will be in place, and not both. Because in previous public meetings, we had said at one point that may be both, which actually then is a bit more restrictive and requires us to actually put more money aside.
It's either or.
So it's either or. And then the other confirmation is by adopting these policies, it doesn't require extra pennies, I think as the city manager said, in FY19, to dedicate towards any of these balances to meet policy, correct?
That's correct.
which are the years that we are out of policy again? So when do we break one of those debt to expenditures or payout ratio limits? So when do we toggle to this new kind of calculation?
It's starting in fiscal 21, I think.
I remember it being different for whether for debt to expenditure was a different time than payout
Yeah.
ratio. But the reason I
Yes.
ask is that another thing that was, I think, important that we talked about separately in these one-off sessions is that when we are back in policy, there is also a way to kind of cure so that we're not automatically beholden to that 12 to 17% again without having some time to get back there. And I think that's specified in there. We have X number of years, correct?
Yeah, so we'll adhere to the same cure period that we have now in our policy.
It seems like we generally shouldn't need to worry about it because we're essentially going to be out of policy for like 20 years in
Quite
some
a while,
places, right?
yeah.
So that the 15 to 20% will be the law of the land for those
For a
that
while.
duration from FY19 or FY20, whenever
Yeah.
we start breaking the policy until 20 years later.
Yeah,
So
the number of years can fluctuate based on how the debt is structured, but it could be that long a period.
Okay. And then the last thing I wanted to ask about is in this spreadsheet, which is a different version than I think we've seen before, because I'm looking at it, the one from last month, it calls out and assumes that we keep unassigned fund balance at 17%.
Right.
And again, I think this is what Mr. Duncan was referencing, is it calls out the fact that essentially, I don't know what line this is, but 4 lines down, that we need, or 5 lines down, for example, in FY19, $885,000 injected into the unassigned fund balance to stay at 17%. And I think a different scenario that we had looked at before is what if we just kept it at, 14.9 million and didn't put in extra money there? Because again, there may be end of year priorities that we decide that we, want to put in. But I want to call it just because it's on the spreadsheet. It doesn't obligate us to put in that 885. I know it's a recommendation of, you all and our advisors to do that. But by putting on here, it does not obligate us to commit 885 this year, 1.1 million next year, and 1 million the following year into the unassigned fund balance. Because number one, by FY20, we're going to be out of compliance and we should be toggling to that new 15 to 20% anyway. But in that year until we break policy, FY19, FY20 in particular, does this obligate us to put in 885 and 1.1 million in unassigned fund balance just to keep it at 17%?
So, no, we're not required to. However, it should be noted that we should keep our capital reserve in good condition. And as modeled, we should be planning the real estate tax increments, the 6 cents, and whatever the models were for the 30-year period, in order to keep and not draw down the capital reserve very rapidly, because the available fund balance relies on the capital reserve as well as the unassigned fund balance. So,
But for all the modeling that we're doing for financing the school, it doesn't count on line 5, like the injection to keep unassigned fund balance at 17%, right? It relies on having the 10 million capital reserves, the pennies, whether it's from a tax rate increase or operating savings, right? It doesn't rely on this extra line.
That's correct. I mean, the plan of finance is to meet the debt service.
Right.
And the plan of finance is what we told the voters for the referendum. And so that plan of finance has integrity. It's what we plan to do. It is, we think, a very practical way to accomplish big capital projects, but that had nothing to do with this chart.
Okay. I would just prefer that we had the other version that modeled both scenarios, where we did not require line 5 in every month, because I think it just scares people that it could either be interpreted down the road as, oh, we're committing to keeping unassigned fund balance at 17%, especially in FY 2021 or whenever we are out of compliance. That calculation is irrelevant because we've toggled to the 15 to 20% calculation, correct? I mean, it's important to keep that number in there. Does that make, I know that unassigned fund balance is a subset of the 15 to 20%.
Right.
But I want to make sure that, again, we're not beholden to both policies, because
Right.
we are well within the 15 to 20% in either scenario where we've modeled keeping unassigned fund balance static or whether we've modeled keeping it at 17%.
that's correct. But then when we do revert back to our current policy, if and when we do,
20 years from now.
Yeah, and if we have dropped down to 10%,
Yeah.
just an example, in unassigned fund balance, then we have to, within that cure period, 2 years come to 12% and another 3 come to 17%.
Yeah. Now, again, I don't think anyone certainly in future councils won't be irresponsible, just let unassigned fund balance trickle down to that point.
Sure, exactly.
But I think I prefer this chart where we allowed the flexibility of a council to decide at the end of the year, not necessarily feeling like, oh, we got to stick to keeping unassigned fund balance at 17%, especially when we've toggled to the other calculation. Because we're taking on so much debt, need to take care of that money.
And also our model relies on 3 payments for the economic development piece. So if those are different time frame or delayed or whatever, then of course the reliance on either of the fund balance or the capital reserve would be greater.
Okay.
So
Great. Thank you for answering my questions.
Sure.
Mr. Davenport, did you have something to add? Sure.
Well, I think as was stipulated earlier, Mr. Snyder will probably be here in 20 years, so. You said something about the penny tax increase, and I wanted to follow up on something the city manager said. You've had a very public process around the range of possible tax rate increases that would be necessary to fund this project. And obviously, we've also heard, or I think we're all in agreement, that the city council can take whatever policy actions it wants to, but since you've messaged very transparently at least the floor of 6 cents, the rating agencies look at your website, they look at the newspaper, they're going to have an expectation that 6 cents is something that is enacted. So if you want to do a lesser number of pennies in concert with recurring operational savings to get to a 6 cent equivalent, that's certainly your prerogative, but it's not going to be as powerful a message, and it's going to be out of sync with what you message to the public and to the investor base at large. So, again, it's our job. It's not our job to make policy. That's your side of the dais. It's our job to tell you what's going to resonate best with the very important folks that we have to meet with in 2 months. So that's all, just food for thought.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think I hear you. At the same time, I think it's a potentially good news story that if we can still fund the project from 4 cents of, for example, taxpayer savings and 2 cents from operating savings, that seems like a good news story that we found efficiencies that will be enduring, that will help us support such a project. So I think that would be the counterpoint to that. And I think in an environment where we might have the federal tax impact looming on us in a year or potential recession in 2 years, I think it's important to preserve capacity. And I think there's certainly a willingness by the community to pay for such a project, whether it's through tax increase or others. But I want to make sure that we balance that story too, if that's where we end up at the council budget season. Thank you, though.
All right, thank you. Other questions, comments?
I'd like to second what Ms. Hardy said and ask you, when you go to the ratings agencies, to make sure they understand that, when we had the referendum on the school bond, the value of a penny on the tax rate was different than it is now, because assessments are up and economic growth is at least, as strong as we'd imagined, maybe a little stronger. In other words, 6 cents 6 months ago is different from, the money that 6 cents throws off today. And that's just a mathematical fact. And so I think we get, and I of course always ask for everything to be expressed in dollar terms, not cents terms, for that reason. We need to raise about $2.4 million, as I understand it. So how are we going to do that? Some combination of the things Ms. Hardy talked about is what I'm going to be looking at when I do the budget, because I do think it's important that we try to reserve some capacity for things that we can't predict right now that may come back and hit us next year.
All right, thank you. Any other comments? Vice Mayor Connolly, Mr. Lickenhouse, go ahead.
Okay. So I want to thank you guys for taking the time to meet. I know we've met a number of times as a group and individually. A lot of interesting questions and difficult questions. I have to tell you, though, and just admit to it, that part of this still, for me, I just can't quite wrap my head around it, because we've been told none of this compels us to raise additional taxes to satisfy this. We're going to end up breaking, and stop me if I'm wrong on any of this, we're going to end up breaking either policy, whether we stay with what we have or we enact this new policy. And then the phrase that's been thrown around about toggling between policies, for me, just to some extent is a little bit concerning. So I just want to make sure that I understand exactly what we're doing here when we vote on this. And so I guess the first question I have is, are we going to be breaking either one of these policies at any point in the foreseeable future, both either the existing policy or this new policy? Based on our projections for debt service with the school expenditures, because I know we've run what seem like 10,000 different iterations of these spreadsheets, are we going to be breaking both of these policies at some point in the foreseeable future, regardless of what we do?
Well, so the key thing, the reason we're having this discussion is because we are going to break the 12%. The debt service is 12% of our operating budget policy. And so task one was, well, let's just address that forthrightly. And so the way we've addressed it is by increasing the resilience through increasing our available fund balance target. And so that's a good thing to do, and that's as simple as that. That's what we're doing. Now, one of the things I will just say, that this chart causes a lot of people concern. And that's right if you look at this chart. But here's why I don't get very concerned about this chart. Is that every jurisdiction in America that has a fund balance policy would run the same chart and see the same problem. And it doesn't matter whether the fund balance is at 10% or 30%. The delta between where they are today and where they're going to need to be in the future, because their budgets are growing, will look exactly like this chart. There's nothing unique about this chart, with the one exception of being, because we do have this trajectory of debt service, our metric then requires us to set more money aside. But I think just as financial managers, we recognize that it's important for any jurisdiction in America, as your budget grows, to continue to take care of your reserves and your fund balance. And we're not unique that way. So that's why we typically on this side have been pretty comfortable with this. And we also respect the fact that we've gotten lots of questions about it. But that's kind of the way we see it, and have a little bit less concern about it than I think the questions we're getting.
Okay. So I absolutely understand the need to show fiscal strength, especially in going in front of Moody's to make sure that we've got the highest rating across the board. I do understand how that impacts debt service, that could potentially increase our cost. I think it's great for us to signal to the investment community, anybody that's looking, peeling back the layers of the onion on the finances and budget, that we're doing everything that we can to set aside money to make sure that we preserve fiscal strength, especially in light of $170 million in debt service, I think was the total number was thrown out. But still, it goes back to the fact that I look at this new policy as either directly or indirectly compelling us to raise taxes to make sure that we meet these policies, even though we may break both of them or will break both of them going forward. So I just want to make sure I'm clear about that if we're sitting here 2, 3, 4, 20 years from now and we're looking at these policies and we're making sure that we fill up these buckets, that will be included in the mix. And in terms of the projections that we've run, if we are putting that target out there, you put a target out there to meet it, correct? So the whole point of putting this target out there is to make sure that we meet that. So I just want to make sure that we are clear on the record about this, because I've just run through these numbers a million times and I can't see any other way around it, that this policy will compel us to raise taxes more than we otherwise would have in order to meet some of these obligations. And if I'm wrong about that, please tell me I'm wrong about it, because it makes me feel a lot better about it. And again, all of this in the context of I get the need to make sure that we build up the piggy bank as much as possible to meet some of these demands. But I just want to be clear about that, because when it was initially kind of presented, it was like, well, we're doing this to preserve our credit rating. We're also doing it to strengthen ourselves, fiscally in the eyes of the credit rating agencies and everything else that I said. But no, it's not going to really directly cause us to have to raise taxes. But I've tried to wrap my mind around this, and every way I look at these numbers and slice and dice it, it shows me that yes, at some point, either directly or indirectly, we will have to raise taxes to meet some of these targets. So I just want a very clear answer to that. Is that the case?
Can I just reword what you just said? So it's not going to be any different than what we have done. We have been complying with the 12 to 17% policy up until now. We have issued a lot of debt over the years for different schools, different CIP projects. Yes, 150 plus million is a lot more than the 30. We have gone up to 30 million. So it's prudent budgeting as well as managing any of our overspendings wisely to make sure that we are keeping our reserves in good health. And it's not going to be any different than what we have. We have a policy now, which we've had for many years, the 12 to 17%. yes, in one circumstance during the water proceeds, we have not been in compliance, and the reserves dipped to less than 2 million. And then, of course, there was a trajectory where we built up the reserves. So policies are your guiding principles that make us make these decisions so that we are looking at a longer period in time, not just one budget year at a time, but like 10, 20 years ahead, so that we have no structural negatives and that we're building building strength. So keeping all that in mind, it's not any different than what you're saying.
I would add, I agree with that response, and I would add, Frank, there's nothing free in this world, and so yes, we're setting a higher standard, and that's not cost-free. The way that we envision that we're going to be in compliance is by saving more at year end, and that's in the normal course of business. So the cost of that is that at year end, priority number one would be to build our financial resilience by increasing available fund balance. That's the way we would approach it. If there was a recession, if we ran big deficits and we drew down our reserves, then we would be having a conversation about a more muscular approach to getting back into compliance. That's what your policy stands for. That's what it has stood for since 2001. We've executed that once in our history, and that could happen again in the future. In the normal course of business, we don't think it would be necessary to have pennies on the tax rate for compliance with this policy. There could be emergencies or recovery from emergencies where we would. And that's consistent with the way we've answered that question as it's been phrased, throughout the process. And so hopefully that's clear.
Vice Mayor Conley?
Just to follow up on what Mr. Shields said, basically, any policy could, in the future, cause us to increase our tax rate, no matter what the policy is.
Yeah, I mean, the old policy with the 12% target,
Right.
which we had prior to 2006, as we recovered from the recession, we would have needed to do muscular things to recover to that. We're starting from a higher point, and so we're closer. And so, at any rate,
Right.
I think that compliance does mean sometimes you have to make difficult decisions. That's why they're good policies.
Okay, so just to make sure that I've got this straight, we are going to have to raise taxes to spend more money, and then or ultimately, I think, going to have to raise taxes to make sure that we save more money as well. Right? Am I off on that? Just if in this scenario where we could see a recession, meaning if we're changing from this policy to the next, right? Because we're setting a higher target.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about having more money in reserves, so that money comes from somewhere, and so my answer before is in the normal course of business. That's not different from the way we've been in the past.
It's just a higher threshold.
That's just a higher threshold. Yeah.
So, can I ask to crosswalk the sentence in the RFDP? So West Falls Church will generate revenue for the city to offset capital costs of the new high school and blah, blah, blah. So my question is, we always talk about the revenue that we need in terms of the tax rate. Is it accurate to say that if we commit ourselves to and I know, Joe's going to say we can't count this because the rating agencies won't give us credit for it, but our full intent is to, grow our economy, right, and generate revenue out of not only the West Falls Church Economic Development Project, but citywide. And if we were able to do that to the tune of, $1 million or so by FY20 and FY21, $1 million new additional dollars, that would be the revenue that we would need to fill this hole. Is that accurate?
You all are very the questions are very fixed on this chart, and we just don't think about it that way. And these are long-term goals. This is just a structure of financial resilience.
I'm not
And-
saying that's a
and-
weakness. I mean, I want our community to have a target of growth.
Right.
I want our community to understand that you can do it you can do it the way Ross said. We can raise your taxes and be done with this and get out of here by 9:30 at night.
Yeah.
Or we can fight hammer and claw to try to grow our economy and make the money that we
that's
need
what-
to enjoy the things that we want.
That is the best solution, yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, is there anything else? I'm going to open it up to the public. Is there any member of the public who wishes to speak to this matter? Seeing none, the matter is closed to the public. Any other comments or questions? We have a resolution or a motion.
I'm going to move to adopt TR 17-48.
We have a second.
Mayor, I second that.
All right. Madam Clerk?
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
I'm sorry, was that yes?
Yes.
Mr. Lichtenhouse?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. Z?
Yes.
And Mayor Tarter?
Yes.
Thank you, council. Motion carries 7-0.
Great, thank you. Thank you all. Appreciate you coming out.
Mayor, can I make a request?
Yes.
So as we look at fiscal policies every 2 years, I know we talked about how this toggling concept, and I think in one of our one-on-ones with Davenport, they mentioned that more people are moving to this concept of the ladder toggle, the using just available balance. I'd like us just to consider that because frankly, this is confusing. It's really just makes it hard for us to figure out which scenario you toggle to. And if this simplifies our financial policies and more people are moving to it in 2 years, maybe we should think about that too.
Yeah, and also after our meeting with the rating agencies, we'll have a better idea of how well it's received and if that's the route we want to go.
Thank you.
All right, thanks very much. Let's move on to the consent agenda.
And Mayor Tarter, if I could just thank Mr. Mason and Ms. Dierkse, who've spent a lot of time with us on this policy, and we really appreciate your advice and counsel on this. So thank you.
All right. Great, thank you so much. All right, is there anyone who would like to remove any item from the consent agenda? All right, if not, City Manager, would you like to read the consent agenda for us?
Yes. Thank you, Mayor. Let me get myself organized here. So, what do we have on consent? So item 1 on the consent calendar is the authorization for the city manager to accept specific deeds of dedication and easement for the Broad and Cherry Intersection Improvements Project. And by council policy, easements that require payment come to council. There are 2 easements in this case. And the improvements that are envisioned at Cherry and Broad have been in this capital improvements program for 2 years. And the goal is to improve pedestrian safety in this intersection, ADA compliance, and we're also under sort of a long-term mandate to get our signals off of Dominion's power poles and onto standalone mast arms, and this will accomplish that. The other item on the consent agenda is the slate of appointments.
All right, again, would anyone like to remove anything from the consent
Mayor, I
agenda?
move the items on consent, including the item that the city manager spoke of, which is TR 18-14, and ask council to appoint the following slate candidates: Rob Puentes to the Plan Commission, Kim Hicks to the Recreation Parks Advisory Board, appointment of Keith Bartlett to the Board of Zoning Appeals, reappointment of Chris McLeod to the Environmental Sustainability Council, reappointment of John Ward to the Environmental Sustainability Council, reappointment of Corey Firestone Weiss to the Environmental Sustainability Council, reappointment of William Ackerman to the Citizens Advisory Committee on Transportation, and the reappointment of Alyssa Macht to the Human Services Advisory Council.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, the ayes have it. Any business not on the agenda? Any standing and regional committee or council liaison reports?
Is Mr. Snyder, are you able to go to the Thursday NVT PCC meeting?
I think so, Councilmember
I
Duncan.
just noticed Jeff had sent emails around, and looks like an interesting meeting. Sounds like the Metro, boss is going to be there. Anyway, just let me know.
You're welcome to come as well.
No,
if
no,
you'd
no.
like.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, Ross, you got appointed to the PCAC? Don't ask me what it stands for. And are you getting those emails? Because I'm still getting them. They still.
For the PCAC?
Yeah, they're meeting.
I have not.
They're meeting Wednesday, and they think that I am, and I'm not on that anymore because I can't be on it. Okay, so I don't know if the meeting will come off. They were doing a quorum call, and I didn't respond, so. Okay, well, it's at a
Thank you.
wildly inconvenient time of 6:30, but at least it's not too far away. It's out at Merrifield. Mr. Manager, you'd said something there about a Thursday meeting. The EDC is still planning to meet Thursday morning at 9 o'clock. Are we going to have the pleasure of your company at that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. And I'd like to circulate the agenda to everybody, just to look at, so you know what we're talking about. But don't forget to RSVP for the Target grand opening Tuesday, March 6th at 6 o'clock.
Vice Mayor Connolly.
There are two meetings that have been canceled this week. The Government Operations Committee, which was scheduled to meet tomorrow, and the Budget and Finance Committee meeting is scheduled to meet Friday, have both been canceled. And I would like to invite all members of the community to attend the Women's History Walk, which is Sunday, March 18th, starting at 4 p.m. Following the Sunday Series Town Hall meeting, we'll start out here and walk towards Tinner Hill, recognizing about 25 women who have contributed to the history of Falls Church.
All right. Anything else?
Did you, Miller House, since you said we're going to close it out tomorrow, you talked about having some event to commemorate that for, public awareness purposes. Is that still?
That is being planned in the warmer months to have a groundbreaking, and so details to follow.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Anything else on that front? Any council member comments? Let's move on to the approval of the minutes. Anyone have any comments?
Mr. Mayor, just a note that my absence was as a result of being in Richmond for the Virginia Transit Association's meeting with the governor and the Secretary of Transportation, and I'm glad to be here more often in Richmond. Thank you.
Guess we know where your
All right.
priorities are.
Any comments to the minutes of that date?
Madam Clerk, line 42, fellows. Has no E, I think, right? I know. I haven't had a chance to read the rest, but she's assured me that if I find anything else, she can change it, so.
All right. Any other comments? None? Do we
Move
have,
approval of the meeting minutes of January 22nd, 2018.
do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The ayes have it. Anything else to be said tonight?
Second.
All right. Sounds like a plan. Let's do it.